Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever in the world you are. I hope you're having a fantastic day. You can hear slightly tired Noah right now. Hello, Beans. Yeah, hello, Sam. Welcome in. You'll hear slightly tired Noah right now. I just want to say right here. I just want to have said here that I'm like super tired. The last few weeks have been so tiring with EUIC and locals and work, like full-time and other things, and I don't really want to go too much in detail about it, but like family members passing, multiple, like I can use a distraction here, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But if I happen to crash later in stream, then hey, and yes, it's good content. Anyway, this is the deck list that I'm gonna be playing. I honestly wanted to play Magnezone Box a few weeks ago already, but I wanted to wait specifically until Senate Heroes was legal for Poké-Commander, because I really wanted to play Canary in this list. That's the only reason I wanted to play Canary in this list. That's specifically what I wanted. This is like a preview of the deck. This is of course not every card. I've made this list like I want to say like a full month ago. So do I fully remember what cards are in this deck? No, like absolutely not. Do I know what the win cons are for this deck? Probably not. But I think that once again makes for better content. That looks suspiciously like a deck I don't want to play against. Awesome. Anyway, I guess I'll give it a scroll. You see on stream live what cards are in there. Why the fuck is Zapdos in this list? Like, at all? I don't know, man. Yeah, the rest of this seems pretty normal. It's not that big of a list, especially since there's 23 energies in here. Yeah. Nah, I'd win. Yeah, you probably will. Let's be honest. You probably would beat me 1v1 with this if you're playing Poké. Like, not gonna lie. I do like the fact that, like, I do like the idea of Tapu Koko being a possible commander for this. Raz may have some sauce. I hope so. I really hope Raz has some sauce. We'll see. Because Raz had some technical difficulties with Limitless deck building, from what I heard, but I'm not sure if he actually succeeded in finishing a new list or if he's just gonna be playing an old list with Pokévad. But we'll see. This is gonna be like one of those games where we actually have more than one person playing. So let me go to untap. Is the music? Hold on. I'll also undeafen on Discord. Let me just do a quick audio check to actually check. There's audio transmission here. If I do a mic test here. If I do a mic test here, then Discord is picking up the audio. Yeah, because I'm hearing double now. Alright, awesome. Alright. Feel free to unmute, friends, if you want to play.
Hello, hello.
Oh, you're a little loud for me.
What the f-
What am I hearing?
I don't know.
Hi, Rasper. Was that you? Was that your music in the background?
Like sound effects?
I think it... I mean, I'm not hearing it anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, it was you. Okay. Awesome. I was so confused.
Okay,
when
I was trying to figure out. I was in the other call and I kept hearing it. I was trying to figure out if someone was playing a sound effect on their freaking Discord soundboard.
You mean
Or
this
what is
one?
that?
What the fuck is that? What is that?
It's a song, obviously. Alright, that's enough.
Okay, sorry.
No, you're fine. I was about to click a mute soundboard on you. You're so fine. You're so fine. Oh my god. I'm gonna click mute soundboard on your ass.
Okay, yeah, I'm muting soundboards. That is.
Aw.
Are you ready to play a game? Actually, judging from the past of me hosting this, could someone else make the game, please, and not me?
Okay.
I would appreciate if someone else could make the game and not me.
Raspberry's hosting. Really?
Your thing. I'm glad we finally got like a more than 2-player game for once in a while. I know that like
I got tired of losing.
I got tired. And the funny thing is, I'm playing a deck that's geared more towards 1v1. Because it's just Unga Bunga take it. Yeah, you're true. You are playing the 1v1 deck. I just think it's very funny. No, I'd win. Let me play Sandport. I already muted you on my end. I have surprisingly little decks on here. Man, it's been so long since I've actually played this on tap. It's crazy.
I have a grand total of 1 deck in this.
You have a grand total of 1 deck. That's awesome.
Too much of them.
Oh no, how do I fix this? There it is. Multiplayer split view.
Alright, let me just shuffle my deck. Wait, where did you find multiplayer
terrible untap is.
Where did you find multiplayer split view?
It's on the sidebar, 3rd from the bottom.
Oh, it's that one. Yeah, okay, cool.
Wait, what the hell? Why the hell do I have 97 cards? What?
Uh-oh.
Well, it says Sam has 97 cards as well, right?
I have 99.
Wait, what is this? I'm seeing like a deck here on the top. You guys are seeing this as well, right?
I think that's Raspberry.
That's Rasper's deck, but where the fuck is your deck? Oh, I think it's because it's Rasper's turn that it's showing Rasper's deck.
Oh.
I think that's what it is.
I think I leave for now and like maybe fix the issue real quick.
Well, I'm gonna roll my dice.
Actually, I think if you click the thing that says has W next to it, you can just add cards into the game. So if you want to add some more cards to your deck, you can do that via that way. If you want to.
I just click the deck, right?
W is just insert card or token.
Yeah. So you can that's normally what we do to insert a GX and V-star marker, but you can use them to insert actual cards into the game as well. Pretty sure.
I assume Raspberry just had the GX and V-star marker in his deck number.
I think that's what it was, yeah. Because I usually build 102 card decks in here, whereas with like those two, with like these 3, the commander and the 2 markers in the start in play.
All right. Can I roll my dice now?
Yeah, go for it. I'll roll as well.
3.
I rolled 4.
And now I'm wrong. Roll D6.
2. Okay, so I get to choose. Oh man, do I want to go first? Do I want to go first with this deck actually? Not sure.
Playing Maridon box?
I'm not playing. Are you seeing my commander? It's not Maridon.
It's an electric box, so you're gonna want to attack. It's the same thing every time.
I don't think I want to attack turn 1 though. I think I'm gonna go first.
Alright, who else gets to go first?
And then Rasper can go after me, and then you can go like the second, Sam.
I go last?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, why the hell did it remove the cards? What the hell?
It removed the cards from the game? Wait, what? Could you not add them to your deck?
I want to, but like...
Hold on, I'm gonna try that as well, see if I can make it work. And if I do send to main deck top, yeah, I now have a 100 card deck. Oh no, wait, it removes from the game. Yeah, you're right. That's crazy. What the hell? I guess you should. I guess we should leave. You should leave the lobby and just remake the. Just add the 2 cards to the deck and then.
Isn't Rasper hosting the game?
Yeah, that's why I said remake the game because Rasper is hosting. Oh no, but Rasper can't leave and we're still here. Actually, never mind.
Oh yeah, if you try to put it in the deck, it just deletes it.
Yeah. I guess that is akin to Magic the Gathering rules, where if you add like a token from outside the game, and if it gets shuffled into your deck or discard pile, it just gets yeeted from the game.
Interesting.
That is how Magic the Gathering handles that. So I guess that makes sense. This is technically based on Magic the Gathering.
So I'm going last. I get to play supporters.
Yep.
I wanted to go first. That's no fun.
No, you mean?
All right. Wait, why is the hold on? Why is this so weirdly cut off? Oh, it's fine actually. I think. No, it's not fine. Give me a sec. Man, streaming is difficult. Fixing overlays is so hard, man. I'll also move my camera down so you can actually see who's gaming up there. And that box can also go down slightly.
I can't find the game you're in.
You cannot? You can't find it?
Yeah. Oh, never mind.
Huh?
I can't find it. Okay, never mind.
Okay,
Oh.
there you go.
I was about to
Okay.
say, that means we get to re-roll the dice if we restart.
No. That's definitely not how that works. Alright. I have shuffled my deck. What? Raspberry has a 196 card deck now.
No, I have 99 cards.
What? Why am I seeing this 196 then? Yeah, no, it is.
Rasper,
I think this is a graphical issue on my part, I think.
If you look at the chat box, it says he inserted a main deck of 99 cards with 3 cards in play.
Yeah. For me, it's showing.
Double on
Hold
his
on.
screen.
I'm gonna refresh my tab because for me, it's showing that he inserted his deck twice into the game.
Yeah, I see 2 decks on the board.
Oh, I see one now. After refresh, yeah, we're fine. We're fine. All right.
Yeah.
Let's draw 7.
Draw 2.
All right. Wait, what the fuck is this doing in the list? Oh, it's that thing. Okay, yeah. See, this is how I do not remember.
I don't play this client anymore. This is so buns. Alright, now draw to prizes. Draw 2. Prize.
Okay, I have a starting Pokemon. And also one for on the bench. I'm not sure if that's smart, but we're gonna do it anyway. And then we're gonna draw 10 cards to prizes. Alright, is everyone ready to start?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not just putting my price card. What the hell is it so moving so much? What?
Sarah Ledge. Okay.
Yeah.
Alright, I'll just send things face up.
I remember I teamed up on someone with that.
Alright, I'll draw a card for turn. I'll attach a Skitty. And I'll pass.
Wow.
Wait,
That's
man,
good.
don't I need to put down my prizes. Don't do me
How hard
like
is
that.
it? You not have your prizes down, Raspberry?
We'll
It's not
have
my
now.
turn.
It's not, no, I passed turn, but it passes to you instead of to Raspberry, unfortunately. What?
It passed back to you.
What the hell?
Oh, hell no.
Wow.
It is showing 10 prizes for you, Raspberry. It's fine.
I'll put them down.
Okay, just whatever.
Yeah, okay,
Guys,
go
ready for
ahead.
prizes?
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna draw one and get my bag. First, I'm gonna play Pokédex. Yeah.
Oh shit. It's Pokédex. It's recon
Wow.
directive on an item card. Oh no.
Airmail.
Oh yeah, airmail, I guess. Yeah, true.
I mean, it's kind of just like a side grade to Arcobite, or I don't know. It's just another item draw.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you're not playing that many shuffle effects, then it's essentially the same thing.
What?
Hmm?
I can't explain my luck, but I just got that top deck, I swear.
Okay,
Top search.
computer search. That's the A-spec.
Yeah. Top deck.
I mean,
Without any start.
I also have my A-spec in my opening hand, so it's not that
All right.
lucky, I guess.
So I'm gonna be playing Hand Disruption. Screw you, Noah.
I mean, Prime Catcher's not that important in early game, right?
Yes, it is.
It's
It's the most important one.
How do you put top deck on the bottom again?
You draw.
if you left click the cards, you can choose main deck bottom.
Kind of
Like if you do send to, and then main deck bottom. Or Y, I guess. I don't know if the hotkeys are active for you, but yeah. And did you actually have to show us what cards you drew off that? I mean, you didn't have to show us, but I'm assuming
You did not have to.
but I'm assuming it's gonna be played, sir.
Yeah,
That's what I'm guessing.
Be, yeah. I'm off for now.
Oh, Noah.
Mm-hmm.
To see other people's stuff, you can, if you click on their name in the top the right corner, you can switch between whose hand is shown.
Yeah. I've noticed that, like, I think like 10 seconds before you said it, but thanks. Oh, double tills on a dual ball. Yikes.
That's unfortunate.
That is so sad. I mean, it's part of the game, I guess.
Now I'm gonna play down Jirachi.
This list is so outdated. Jirachi EX. Ripping that.
Hell yeah. That's a juicy Prime Catcher target, no.
But now he can't play the supporter, so this is a really good hand disruption turn.
Yeah, honestly, with the opening hand that I had, I would much rather go second, but yeah, I mean, I don't get to choose that, of course.
I think I have pretty disgusting going first turn, but I'm going second.
Yeah, we should have swapped, I guess.
Yeah, you should let me.
I'm going second, right?
No, you're. I mean, you're.
Supporter.
You cannot play a supporter because you're not the person to go quote unquote second in this first turn.
You're not going last.
Oh,
yeah.
Hell no. Why the hell did I forget the rules?
Hell no.
Uh-oh.
Shit's unfair, man. Shit's unfair.
Alright, what supporter is he grabbing?
I'm thinking, man, I think it's gonna be like this, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, I guess I just realized that I forgot to update to post a ban list update. It's been sitting there for a while, but I guess I forgot to post it.
Oh, you didn't post it?
Oops. No, it's fine.
Wait, so what's getting banned? Wait.
Nothing is getting banned from Ascended Heroes.
You can
it was
till the you can wait till the ban list comes out.
Yeah, there's gonna be like a handful of unbans, but there's no new bans, no.
Oh, thank you. Good. That's very good.
I was very much debating banning Fan Rotom, but we're keeping it for now.
You can't play that.
No, this is what he's grabbing from Jirachi.
Yeah, I'm grabbing it
Oh, it
from
just
draft.
says it was moved from play to hand and then hand to play. I don't know.
What? Oh, what the hell?
That was
Why
probably
is
an
it
accident, yeah.
Oh,
Untap
why the fuck?
sucks.
Why the hell is my Why is my computer search becoming professor's research?
Uh-oh. Oh no! You want to discard your research with the computer search? I do see both now on the field. Okay.
Why would I discard that?
The game is just being unhelpful.
The game is mean to me.
Right, so Carmen and Marlis. Carmen is a supporter you could have played.
Shit. Oh.
I don't think he wanted to discard his computer search.
Yeah, these are the two computer search discards, yeah. That's fair.
Yeah.
You don't have to show a switch you're grabbing. Just FYI.
But I will. No.
You will, because you're gonna play it immediately, probably. But I mean, yeah.
It's this. It's literally this, bro.
Okay, that's fair.
I'll grab Shark Cadet and a Phoebus. Or no,
Oh no, it's the stupid Milotic deck again.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
We forgot about Melodic because it played so many 1v1 games. I mean, Melodic is fun. Sorry, I should rephrase it. I didn't want to say Melodic is fun. I wanted to say Melodic is not that broken. At least not compared to Telepath Gardevoir. That shit was actually so broken. Holy fuck.
Nah, it was completely balanced. Like.
Oh, you want me? Do you guys want me to unban Telepath Gardevoir? Let me know in the chat.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, let's do that. And also end my turn.
Okay.
Because you know, I was discussing with Sam and DMs like to potentially make two separate ban lists, like one for 1v1 and one for multiplayer. But
that's too complicated. Oh, you guys
it's too complicated.
By the way,
it is too complicated, probably. Yeah.
You guys are cooked. All right, first off, Battle Compressor.
Also, by the way, I like that we're continuing on the trend of me and Sam both running Fan Rotom and me never finding it on turn one, and him probably finding it on turn one.
Oh, I have Battle VIP Pass Nest Ball in hand.
Yeah, he's finding it on turn one. Like, how the fuck do you also always open Battle VIP Pass? That shit's crazy.
It's a good card.
You have it. Like, yeah, you just have it in your opening hand like 50% of the games. That's not how math works.
There's Battle VIP Pass.
Battle VIPness Pass.
And then we're gonna get Ban Rotom.
Ban Rotom, yeah.
No, don't ban Rotom. I like
oh,
no,
why can I never find Fan Rotom turn one, but you always find it? This is like it's like a meme at this point.
Because I'm better.
That's crazy.
Palkia.
Yeah, FYI, this guy actually wanted to play Gardevoir today. Like Gardevoir box.
We're gonna play Nest Ball.
Oh my god. Bro, it's insane setup. I now see what you meant with I have a really good turn one going first.
And then I'll use Fan Call. Get Knock Towel. And Hoot Hoot. And Ditto Prism Star.
Alright. So, Rasper, do you happen to have hand disruption in your hands?
I'll put Hoot Hoot into play. I'll
I
put
could
my
have probably
commander
played it if
into
I
play.
didn't. I would have probably played it if I wasn't dumb.
That's
And
fair.
then I'll play Gladion from my hand.
Oh, he does
Because,
have a
like, I had
supporter.
Crush in my hand.
Yeah, exactly.
I could have just preserved it, but I thought it, like, I'm second.
That's fair, that's fair.
Okay, and Gladion goes into my hand. I'll put that card into my hand, and this goes into my prizes. Do I have to reveal the card on Gladion?
No, you don't. This is any cards. In general,
Well, I'm gonna be
like,
playing
stuff
it
has to be
anyway.
revealed if we have to check that you're not cheating, but you can grab any card from
Broken
prizes.
Vessel, and off of there's Vessel, I'll discard more Pokemon Search. That I
Bro just
got in
had
my starting
all
hand.
Pokemon Surge in his hand. That's crazy.
I have more in my hand. Don't worry, I'm not playing it this turn. I'll get 2 water energy. There's the second one. I actually put it in my hand.
How does one have so much?
Yeah, Sam is always just built different with the turn ones. I don't know what it is, man. He just always has everything.
Actually,
Or
I
like
remember
almost
that
always.
I can just play down my bench protection unlike you, Sam. I mean, Noah.
I'll use concealed cards.
Yeah, to be fair, I feel like Sam is playing. I feel like Sam is playing BDIF, if I'm being honest. So don't beat up yourself too much if you lose against this.
And I think that I'll just attach to Minum and pass my turn.
Right. I will draw a card for turn. And I will play Canary, discarding a lightning energy from my hands. To search my deck for 4 lightning Pokemon and putting them into my hand.
I just opened like the source code or something.
What did you? This is source code?
Dude, I had like code on my screen. Okay,
All right,
I think I fixed it.
Grabbing this one for sure. Probably smarter to grab evolution here since Maridon can find basics.
I can still see my prize cards, but I keep pressing conceal all.
Sounds like Sam is cheating. I'm joking. I'll grab Magnemite.
All like 5 times. I'm refreshing this game again. Dude, Untap is so buns.
These are the 4 Pokemon that I'm grabbing from Maridon.
Magnemite, Magneton, and Maridon.
Yep. Alright.
Wait, why did you say I'm the 4 Pokemon I grabbed from Maridon?
What? No, Canary is grabbing me 4 lightning Pokemon.
I know, but like, why would you say?
Alright, let's use Maridon. Search my deck for 2 basics. Put on there. Let's go grab Boltund V. Hello, Boltund V. Yeah. And let's go grab Rotom V. Actually, no. Hold on. Don't want this. I want Pidgey. Alright, I will bench the Magnemite. Let me actually shuffle my deck as well before we move on. I will retreat my Skitty.
He's bench locked himself.
Yep. Sure did. Right, I'll
I
retreat
guess he's not
Skitty.
playing that type of Coco anytime soon. Oh, he's just gonna
Alright.
electrify.
I'll attach lightning here. And I will indeed use Electrify to search my deck for up to 2 lightning energy cards and attach them to my bench Pokemon in any way I like. Bolt on V, my goat. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Hello, Strategic. Welcome in. I'll attach.
So
Hold on. I'll attach 1 to the Magnemite and 1 to the Miraidon. And that is my turn.
okay, so now it's mine. I draw for. Oh, Noah, do you think I should still play the destruction?
I mean, I have 2 Magneton in hand, but he has Noctowl in hand, so I
You
think
think I won't find it?
I think it's probably good to play some hand disruption. I'm gonna cry a little inside, but I think it's
Find
worth.
it. You guys
Okay,
I'm not
no
sure.
faith.
I genuinely just abducted it.
Who knows?
I'm just gonna find it anyway because I'm built different.
This is
Sure,
literally my
bro.
top deck. I don't know. I know I have it, but it's cool.
Bodybuilding dumbbells? Alright.
No, Rocket Tap Man, I
Shuffling in the
think.
deck. Send all
Alright.
the main deck top.
Or yeah.
Shuffles the deck. And thanks for letting me draw 10 cards.
I mean, I feel like increasing his hand size a little is probably better than allowing him to pick any 2 trainer cards from his hand, if we're gonna be honest. Right? UIC was pretty fun, thank you for asking. I would say that flights there and back were less fun, mostly because of delays and cancellations, and me having to spend another day in England. Like, ugh. But other than that, it was really fun to meet up with friends and stuff.
Better than having to stay a day in France.
True.
What the hell is France?
What the hell is even France?
Well,
Fuck,
guys,
you mean
thanks
you?
for making my next turn much stronger. Thank you.
Oh
Very
no.
game,
Oh, no worries.
very gamer.
No worries. Would you appreciate disruption next turn too?
I say still won't let me conceal my prize cards.
It is offended the British man. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, Strategic, but my flight home actually was cancelled because of snow in the Netherlands, which is crazy.
He rips
So-
the 9 tails.
At least we
Oh,
are in
no.
France. True.
I'ma use Ninetales ability to like discard a fire element.
Yep.
Just pretty cool.
9 tails on the board.
I love to see it. Roast reveal Ninetales. No, I'm sorry.
No.
It was meant as a joke, Strategic. Don't worry.
No, I was gonna bully you this turn, but I think I have a stronger target now.
Oh hell no, man.
You think
Leave
so?
alone.
Dude, he's got 3 prizes on the board that I can take right this turn.
Oh
And
right,
I'm like-
Jirachi Jai's 2 concealed cards. Oh no.
I literally need to find the bench protection now.
That won't save you.
No fucking way. No fucking way you have it.
Dude, I've got. Dude, I play Noctowl. I can find my bench, my little funny card.
The
Canceling
little
Cologne.
funny card called Canceling Cologne and Prime Catcher.
Canceling Cologne Prime Catcher. GG, shake my hand.
Guys,
Yikes.
pull up. My prizes are loading. Pull up.
We are holding up. Don't worry. Still holding on.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to load this shit.
Oh, guys, look at how many cards I have left in deck.
Get the fuck out.
Hell no.
Oh, I'm not sorry.
Stop speaking.
Stop speaking. Stop existing.
I price too much good shit, man. I price too much.
Uh-oh.
My prize cards are diabolical. But I'm just built different, so they work.
For me, they do not.
I love how this game is probably going to boil down to Sam is going to be targeting Raz. So I'm going to be targeting Sam, which makes Raz want to target me. I think that's what this game is going to boil down to.
Well, your board is extremely not threatening at all. So.
Actually, I think we should all just like focus on Noah.
No!
You know what, Raspberry? I think we can make a deal. I think we just bully Noah.
No!
I think that could work.
Okay, Noah. Okay, Sam. Listen, if I won't take any chaos on you for few turns, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sure. Then like let's just out target Noah and we'll be fine.
Well, I mean,
No! Please,
it depends.
if you target me, you're gonna lose because he plays water types.
Noah,
I don't care.
shush.
I don't care, man. I don't care.
He's literally gonna take 3 prizes off of you, 3 lives off of you next turn.
No. I could just
No,
take
he
2
won't.
off of Noah.
No, he won't. He's a very good man, you know. Why are you like saying such bad things about him? Do you not have manners?
Are you seeing the shit chat? They're ganging up on me once again. Streamers never allowed to win. I'm assuming you're retreating, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So are you gonna evolve into your commander or not?
Probably eventually.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, good.
Yeah, let me just like I bench this.
Did you get auto-modded again? You did get auto-modded. the phrase three-way got auto-modded.
Just like immediately send the unknown to the trash and draw card while I'm pushing that to the active. Also,
You can't use unknown while it's in the active. You have to retreat.
Yeah.
I said I moved it to the bench, bro.
Okay.
But which Pokemon is active?
It didn't show that on the screen.
Oh, it's a Charcadet. Okay. Sorry, my bad. We all Gucci now. We're on the same page. Go ahead and draw that card.
Can you knock out Bolton this turn?
Bro, I wasted my attack on retreating the unknown.
Oh.
Wish I could. I can't.
He only has 2 fire and discards.
How did you draw a card? Oh wait, it was from
the unknown.
Wow.
From the unknown.
Yeah. Okay, I'm retarded. My fault.
Wait.
Ah, you're good.
What
You're fine.
Again?
Enjoy dinner.
What are you again?
What?
What?
Not. Huh?
Huh?
Oh. Okay, it's your turn, Sam. Like just.
He's gonna pass. All right. Is Noah actually threatening enough to kill this turn?
Yeah, he is. He is.
Well, I mean, you have.
That's my
You know, you've got pretty strong draw on the board there, buddy.
Man, listen. I thought we had that deal. You ain't targeting me. I ain't targeting you. We just like try to kill Noah.
Oh, how I miss these games where I'm getting targeted down by my friends.
Okay, first off, I'm gonna play Trek and Shoes. And I will move that to the discard. And draw 1 card.
Type shit, bro. Type shit.
Type shit, exactly. I will use concealed cards to discard a basic water energy. God, I hate untap so much.
Yeah, me too. Honestly, if we were able to like get PTCG Sim or PvP Tabletop to allow like up to 4 game players, That'd be so amazing.
Oh hell
Technically,
yeah!
technically, I could try if like the PTCG sim is open source because like I'm pretty good at TypeScript.
Oh,
All right.
oh, okay. Hold
Well,
up.
while you guys
Yeah.
so anyways, I got that off that Rockets admin earlier, so I'm gonna go find that
Oh yeah,
guy.
that's fair. Best card in format. That's right.
I'm gonna go get the
Uh,
guy.
The
You don't
guy
have
being
any
knocked
bench
out.
protection.
Better?
Raspberry, do you not have any bench protection over there?
And no one doesn't listen, man. Listen, I thought we had a deal. Man. And then
Okay, but
They're
3
already
prize
turning
cards
on
is
each
3
other.
prize cards.
They're already turning on each other. This is crazy.
my mom is kind of homeless.
I
Man,
bet my mom is kind of homeless. I'll play dive ball.
Wait, hold on. Which Pokemon did you grab off Luxury Ball? I didn't see anything.
Take a wild guess, Noah.
I mean, I know it's Noctowl, but I don't see Noctowl on the field. Oh, it's Poké-V-Star. Okay. Sorry.
I'm getting a dive ball for Palkia,
Okay.
and luxury ball got knocked out. I'm gonna evolve into Palkia V-Star.
Sorry.
This guy.
For a second, I thought you were getting Dive Ball off of Luxury Ball, and I'm like, wait. Hold up.
I'll play Poké-Gear 3.0. For some reason, it's freaking dripped out.
Hell yeah. So dripped. With the Johto region.
Okay, boss here would be hilarious. Oh. Man.
From his reaction, I don't think he got boss.
Well, I'll get. Wait. I'm gonna get this guy actually.
Irida. Okay. That is a supporter.
Yes, it is.
In the targeting game? What? In the trading card game. Sorry. Why did I say targeting game? Like I said, guys, I'm tired today. Like, words are probably gonna be. Language is gonna be subjective during
I'm going to play
today.
escape rope on Mr. Noah over there.
Oh boy. I guess this is not that hard to choose. I'll just push Zapdos.
What?
Wait, do I push Zapdos?
No, you pushed him.
I guess I did. Yeah, I guess I did.
He's just gonna have air balloon or something in hand.
It would be really funny if I top decked that, yeah.
I was like, why wouldn't you push? Why did you not push like Magnemite?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Why didn't I do that?
He's got no retreat cost, right?
No, he does. There's no other Magnemite on the bench.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Now time for shit to get real.
Uh-oh. Bro's moving his cards so close together, he's probably playing Skyfield at this point.
Maybe.
He's got to be
Okay,
playing
knocked out
Skyfield.
from my hand.
Oh boy. That's also good, man.
And I'm gonna go find some cards. I'll get Area Zero Underpants.
Oh, it's not even Skyfield for us. Oh no.
Oh no,
I mean, it
Rasper
is
can
for
use it.
Rasper. I was about to say Rasper does
Yeah.
have a Terra, actually.
no,
It's
I
just
have
me.
excluded again.
I am excluded again. What a sentence to say. Oh my god.
As you should be.
Pardon?
What?
Pardon?
Huh?
Bullying the streamer, huh?
Yes.
That's
That is
crazy.
in fact what's happening.
Loki, imagine if we just like focus Noah down so much that he like rage quits. It would be so
Yeah, imagine
funny.
we just make Noah scoop.
Yeah.
Honestly, it would take a lot to make me scoop. It would take so much to make me scoop.
What other? I'll get canceling clone in case anyone gets a little silly.
Actually, just asking, can I switch to my Regigigas list real quick? Because you said you.
No, escape rope only targets one other player, so.
It's a gusting effect. I'll put Area
Yeah.
0 underdepths into play.
Yeah.
No, you said it's very hard to make you rage quit, right? Or I mean scoop.
Yeah, it's gonna be very hard to make me scoop. Yeah. Especially since this is my stream.
Can I switch to my Regigigas list real quick?
No.
We're playing a game already. You can do that next
Already
week.
started.
You can do that next time, I guess.
I mean, I could just like I know
And
switch.
I will quick ball away my rocket's
Cards I have.
Go get a card. Basic Pokemon I'll get is Ditto Prism, and he will go into play.
Right. Man, I wish we could play this
from
IRL.
my hand.
Like that would be so much fun.
Play Manaphy from hand.
Hmm?
I'll play my supporter for turn.
This is a good turn.
I haven't even done like half my stuff yet.
I'm aware.
Where's my water poke? There's my water Pokemon. And here is my item.
Okay. Man.
Alright.
So he has Drizzle for next turn. That's crazy.
How many water energy do I have in the discard? 5. I'll play Aqua Patch to attach a water energy from my discard to one of my benched water Pokemon. That would get attached to Palkia V-Star.
Yuppers.
I hate how it does layers in this game. They're so bad.
Yeah, I just accepted it. I was like, as long as like every card is visible in the stack, you can just hover over it and see what the card is, so it's fine.
And then I will use my V-Star power.
Oh, hell.
Star Portal.
To attach Uno.
Just asking, but am I the only one who can like load the PC chat? The voice chat? Am I the only one who can like load it?
Huh?
You mean in Discord or?
Yeah.
I mean,
What?
I haven't tried to. I can load it, but it's not like we're using it, right?
We're in the call.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I fail to see an issue.
I was just messing around while.
And then I'll attach my water energy for turn onto Terrapagos.
Yeah, sure. Razor was just trying random shit out while Sam does his Exodia turn. I can see the sentiment in that.
Do I save this for next turn or do I keep going? Because it would be really funny to just keep going. I think I save that. Alright, I'm gonna Moonlight Shuriken and kill Ninetales and Jirachi and take 3 prizes.
Oh, what the fuck? Oh,
3 prizes. Okay, so Ditto Prism goes to Lost Zone.
You deserve hell, just know that. I will make you regret this.
Will you now?
You get 3 prizes,
by the way.
Yeah, you get 3 prizes, Sam.
Just so you know, you're.
Well, Oh, Noah's not very threatening. What is he gonna do to me?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, it's everyone's gonna die, by the way. You get 3 prizes, Sam. Yeah. Well, Noah's not very threatening. What is he gonna do to me? Well, Noah's not very threatening. What is he gonna do to me?
Yeah.
Drop power.
A reminder, by the way, Rasper, that the Prism Star is underneath Ninetales, so that goes to Lost Zone.
Yeah. I'm just like, I'm gonna destroy this guy's whole board. I'm done.
Yeah, me too.
Good luck.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and
Wait, what
draw
about
for
my turn, man?
turn.
Oh wait,
That
that's
is a
my turn.
really,
Yeah, it's not your turn.
guys,
Pipe down, little boy.
chat. That is a really funny top deck. Holy shit.
Could you, Noah? What is
That is a really, really funny top deck. I will Prime Catcher the Palkia V-Star to active.
Okay. I don't care. He served his purpose.
what other things does like Noah have
Now,
on board? Oh,
let me do some math.
oh,
Palkia
do I
V-Star
hit the
has
Rapago?
280. So I need to do
Idea.
140 with weakness. So that means I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lightning in play. Okay, so I just need to hit the max elixir. Okay, cool. Let's go for that. Oh, I could have finned first, but I mean, I'll hit it, surely.
It's winning.
Surely I'll hit it. I didn't hit it. Fuck!
Oh, what the fuck, man?
Skill issue.
Wait, no, man. I believe you can do it. I believe in you. Like, there must be a way, right?
Oh my god, that was so
Dude,
bad.
if he's just gonna miss by 1, and then you can just finish me with a manual attach with Abyssal Flame.
No, that won't do shit, man. That won't do shit.
No, you guys can just waste both of your attacks to kill Palkia, who's completely useless. Please do that.
No.
No, don't worry. I think I still have the KO. Oh yeah, I still have the KO. Don't worry.
Okay, cool.
I was doing it for dramatic effect.
Yeah, okay, buddy.
Okay.
Now the question is, do I get Telcaddy or do I get Pidgeotto?
Are you gonna pop Magneton for this? That would be funny.
I'll grab Pidgeotto off of that. And I'll evolve into Pidgeotto. And I'll play Hisuian Heavy Ball.
I think it would be a good idea to just like murder his Terrapagos next turn too.
If I can.
No, I'm asking if I can do it. If I should.
I don't think it
Sure.
matters
Go for
too
it.
much. I think Greninja is like more of a threat actually, but I wanted to be greedy and take surprises.
Palkia and Terrapagos have served their purpose.
Anyway, I'm grabbing Minun off my prizes with this.
Mine.
No, I think I should like focus on Greninja. Yeah.
No, don't kill Greninja. He's innocent.
Wait. It's doing the same thing to me, where I'm trying to do Conceal All, and I'm still seeing my prizes.
I think Intap is broken.
Yeah.
If I do select random, can you guys see what I clicked here, or what I chose here, or not?
No, it still says unknown.
It says unknown. Okay, so I clicked select random, so it like, yeah. I guess that's, if I were to take a prize, that's the prize I'm taking, I guess.
Yeah, I did the unknown, select random prizes.
Fair. I'm gonna attach lightning energy for turn here. I'm gonna evolve into Evolve into Magneton. I'm not gonna use the Poké-Power for this.
How did you Prime Catcher? That's how you got Zapdos out of the active.
Yeah. And I'll use Electro Power. And then I'll swing with Boltstorm into the Palkia V-Star for, let me just do the math, there's 4 energy in play. That's 130 plus 30 is 160 times 2 is 320 damage.
He's got Electro Power to kill Palkia? That's embarrassing.
Yeah, okay. I got my 2 random prizes that I know to take now. Wait.
Okay. So, I think it's my turn.
Send to hands.
Yeah.
Sends to hands. Awesome. Yay! We're playing the video game. Or we're not playing a video game. We're using a website to play a card game. But whatever.
No, we're playing torture. We are being tortured. This is not that hurry.
How much health does that Pidgeotto have?
It is 80.
And how much health does that Magneton have?
It is 80.
Good to know.
Wait, why the? Oh, man.
Rasper, can you please kill that Radiant Greninja if you can?
Yeah, sure, I can. It's just that my ankle isn't loading. Like, I'm gonna say it right now. I can just like this turn just boss up Greninja and murder it, but this thing is just not loading for me.
I would try to refresh the page if something is not loading.
Aight, muchacho, aight.
Also, Noah, how did you take 3 prize cards?
3. I've taken 2.
Okay.
It has
Oh,
it
it
shows
from prize to prize. Oh, my bad, my bad. I don't know. Untap is so buns. I hate this.
yeah.
I
I accidentally dragged the cards instead of adding it to my hand. So yeah.
Anyways, guys, can y'all maybe enable the boss soundboard for me? Maybe, just maybe. I'm still
Huh?
asking for.
What can we do?
Enable the soundboard for me. It will be.
No.
Oh.
Rasper, you know we're not gonna do that.
No. I think you're gonna do that. I think you're gonna do that.
Should I give this guy the benefit of the doubt?
No.
You know what? Sure, you get one chance. You get one chance, and if you mess it up, I'm gonna mute you indefinitely on the soundboard.
Okay.
Rasper, are you gonna take your turn? Raph, he's
That's
gonna
what I'm
time
wondering
out.
as
Can
well.
I just take my turn now?
No. Hold up. This shit's loading. Okay, it's loaded. Yay. Okay, I'm gonna draw a card. Okay, not bad. I'm gonna play down Oricorio.
Oh hell yeah! I love that card.
I'm gonna play down Latias.
Latinas, let's go!
Yeah, Latinas!
Why did I get so excited?
I'm gonna use Oricorio's ability to draw 3.
Unfortunately, Latinas doesn't give several edge free retreats.
Yeah, I know. It's just that it enables me to retreat anything. Okay, hold on. Do I
But
have
Loki,
any piece on the?
with Loki, Fire Metal Psychic is not a bad type combo. Not gonna lie.
Oh, also I'm gonna play Night Treacherous to bring the
Night's
Ninetales.
back. Nice. I love that. That's so funny.
yeah, type shit, bro. Type
My
shit.
next turn is about to be disgusting.
No, it isn't.
Oh, yes, it is. Even if you kill Greninja, that won't save you.
Oh no.
Because
He
what
still
are
has.
you gonna do?
He has Drizzle in hand. That's so that yeah. That is a problem.
You know, I can just like always. I technically can get my Lottie into play this turn. Technically.
Can
Okay,
you?
what does that do for you? You can play Irida. Oh no.
How?
You can play Rocket's admin. Oh,
No,
scary.
no, no. Melodic looks at our hands, not at discard pile.
Oh. I don't have. You could play. Okay, fine. He could play a supporter that he can't use. He can play a water
Okay,
type supporter.
I'm gonna use Ninetales ability to draw 3 because I'm just built like that.
Yep.
You have to discard a fire energy first.
Yeah, he
Yeah, I
did.
did.
He did.
Is he even gonna get enough fire energy in the discard to be able to kill Greninja? I don't know. There's only 3.
Maybe. Wait, what do you mean 3? No, it isn't 3, right?
You have 3 energy in the discard.
Oh, what the fuck?
So, you know, you're only dealing
Wait, hold up,
not
hold up.
enough. You're
No,
dealing.
there must be a way, man. There must be a way. There must be a
Yeah.
way.
Surely
Will,
there's a
will
way.
can Raspberry even get enough damage to kill Greninja?
Raspberry, if you're a gamer, you use the Ditto to get Unknown back to draw one card.
Noah, do you have any supporters in hand?
No, I don't.
Ah,
I have a supporter. You should get that one.
It's probably Nissa or something. Otherwise, he
okay,
would never
fuck it,
tell
I'm
you
gamer.
this happily.
Fuck it, I'm gamer. I'm using D2 to get back Unknown and draw one.
Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah. Now, can that Unknown way load for me? Yeah, it can. Why the hell is it a fire energy? I do not need more fire energy. I do not need more fire energy.
He needs a discard, which he doesn't sound like he has. Might just be a skill issue.
No, it isn't. Okay, fuck it. I'm playing again. Screw you
You're
guys.
playing what? I'm scared. N. Oh
N.
shit. Dude, I had
Okay.
Magnezone in the hand. Oh no.
Well, he's not killing Greninja. That's what matters.
No, I look Greninja. Yeah, I'm killing it. What do you mean?
Unless you have Prime Catcher, but you don't.
Okay, I draw 8, Sam draws 7, and you draw 10.
Yeah, actually, I can because I do in fact have a counter catcher in hand.
Oh,
I hope
wow.
it is so. And also a way to discard all my fire energy.
Wow, how lucky. Good for you.
Yeah, definitely. It isn't just like I'm loading the cards and I'm just spitting shit. No, no. Oh, yeah, never mind. I'm just unlucky. Yes. Actually, maybe.
Unfort.
No, no, hold up. There's a chance.
I mean,
There's a chance.
you could still KO Fan Rotom, so.
Oh, yeah, do that.
I'm gonna just use a like.
Arco Bite. Oh, yeah, there it is. Arco Bite.
Arco Bike? Can you read?
Arco bike, guys. Arco bike.
Shut up. Who's winning? Me. I'm winning.
Oh wait, hold on, my sign turned off. I'm gonna turn it back on.
Oh, okay. Hold up. Hold up. Is this fire? Is this fire?
Is he writing fire?
It is, bro. It is. It is. It is, muchacho. It is fire. It's very fire.
It's very fire.
It's very fire. You don't know how much.
Wait,
fire
are you
that is.
discarding the fiery flint or are you getting the fiery flint?
I'm discarding the fire energy.
Why? You moved something to
You moved
prize.
it to your prizes.
What? Oh, what the fuck, man?
Oh, all my homies hate Untap, right? All my
We should,
homies
like,
hate Untap.
murder the CEO of Antap. Just like, why not? Antap is very evil.
I mean, honestly, if it had like a slightly better interface and slightly better servers, it would be amazing. But it doesn't, so. Right?
I feel like Antap servers are like worse than potato servers. They just like fry servers. Ain't even a potato with just a single fry.
PvP Tabletop is awesome. You should just play that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that had multiplayer functionality,
And
that'd
also
be
if it was
amazing.
fucking open source.
Well, I mean, like
Please.
PTCG Sim functions similarly and is open source, and I think there's another. Like for example, if it was possible in like Twinleaf, I would also take it. You know. Winleaf unfortunately doesn't have all the cards coded in yet, but
Oh, I do not have that. Oh. I did in fact prize my. Oh my. Oh wait, never mind. I did not. Yay. Okay, never mind. I'm happy, guys. I'm very happy.
happy. Dee, 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 dee. Oh, bench barrier. Okay, nice. Slay.
That's inconvenient. I'm gonna have to do something about that.
He has a refined canceling cologne again, which is something.
Didn't he just like use it?
No, he hasn't
Or-
used canceling cologne. He had Drizzle and canceling cologne in hand. Those are the two cards we
You
knew.
guys saw nothing.
But you used N, so he doesn't have those anymore. Hopefully.
Hey, no, look at the chat.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm just gonna knock out.
It said you moved an unknown card from hand to play and then back to hand. So I guess I missed the
Well,
timer.
you didn't see it in time then. That ruins the surprise.
I'm just like KO fan Rotom, I guess.
Okay.
Oh my fucking god, guys! I'm finally getting a prize card. Holy shit! This is so epic.
Yay! Raz is
Yeah.
getting a prize card. Do do
I'll
do
draw
do
for
do
turn.
do.
And then I'll use Minim's ability, Poké power actually, to draw
Hold
2.
on. Sam, please do -1
What?
on lives.
Oh yeah, I'm lose my life.
Yeah.
Guys,
Thank you.
I think Sam was like cheating because he said minus ability, which doesn't exist.
No, he said
Poké
minus Poké power. He corrected himself. He said minus Poké power.
No. He tried to cheat. I think we should like give him a 5 prize penalty. I mean life
5
penalty.
prize penalty.
That's
Wow.
crazy. But prize penalty doesn't matter because we don't win based off prizes.
No, hold up. Give him life penalty.
5 life penalty.
Make him have to lie.
That's more like it. No,
Yeah.
let's just play the game normally. It's a little unfair.
I'll play Good Rod from my hand.
Such a good rod. Why did you roll a d6?
Flip head. This shit is not real.
Is there not a die or a
Like,
coin?
I
So-
trust the dice more.
So
Coin's a lie.
good rod straight up flips a coin, and if it's heads, you search your discard pile for a Pokemon to put on top of your deck, and if it's tails, you search your discard pile for an item card to put on top of your deck.
Yeah.
But he flipped heads, so he's gonna get a Pokemon. He's gonna get Fan Rotom to the top of his deck from discard.
Dude, I had it that turn if I just didn't, whiff on the Good Rod.
What item specifically did you want? Did you want to get Aqua Patch or something?
I did want to get Aqua Patch.
That's valid. That's valid.
Alright, I'll conceal cards. Draw 2. I might be able to still get there anyway, because I'm better.
Oh shit.
No, you're not.
Concealed cards might have given him the nuts.
Play Trainer's Mail
Not.
from my hand.
No, I did not give him that. Ace of cards.
I mean, I'm speculating.
Oh,
I'm just saying every thought out loud because I'm the
I'm
streamer.
better. I'm just better. I'm better than.
Oh my god, he found Prime Catcher off of the That's crazy. That's
I'm
crazy.
better than every single one of you guys.
I mean, that's honestly, that's less lucky. That's less lucky than me top decking Prime Catcher after the first Rockets admin. But still, that makes me mold so much.
So, anyways, I'll play
Wait,
Drizzle from hand.
He just has the Drizzle anyway. That's crazy.
No. I'm not accepting the bad vibes. I'm not accepting the bad vibes, guys. I'm not accepting them.
I'll get Energy Switch from my deck.
Wait, he just has the canceling alone in hand?
Yep.
Oh my god.
I'll play Misty's Tears.
Oh, yeah.
Van Rotom.
I love Misty
water
Steers.
energy.
It's such a funny card, Misty Steers. It's just Earthen Vessel for water, but giga old. It's really funny.
Get that water energy up in here.
Number 5, Burger King foot
I'm gonna prime
lettuce.
catcher that freaking Mew. Get up here, boy. Give me Mew Raspberry. He's dying.
Raspberry, are you here? Raspberry?
Hello? Did he rage quit?
I don't think so. He's still in the call. He's just muted in the call, so I think maybe like someone came in the room or something. I don't know.
Alright, I'll wait for Raspberry then. Actually, I'll just continue my turn in the meantime. I'll attach for turn, play energy switch.
Yeah, that's fair.
Put Suicune V onto the bench.
Mm-hmm.
Do I really want to do that? I'll Hisuian Heavy Ball to get that feller. I haven't played supporter yet.
True.
Dang, I really
Okay,
am good.
First of all, I will fucking give a curse on you for this shit you did. Like, oh my god, bro, please stop sniping me. It's just mean, you know?
I prime catchered
Like-
your Mew.
Yeah,
Used
he
it.
did.
Yeah, I know. Like, I would just delete my until you send me, okay? I will just do it. Just like leave me alone.
Bishop Mew.
Honestly,
reactive.
Raspberry, honestly, after this turn, I think Sam will leave you alone. Honestly.
Raspberry, put Mew in the active, please, so I can play my
You
canceling cologne.
fucking KO it anyways. What's the point?
Well, so he can cancel in
Please,
Cologne, so he can also
fucking
kill something off the
torturing
bench.
me.
That's the
Please,
plan.
stop
He wants a
torturing
prime catcher to cancel in Cologne.
Mew, I played my prime catcher. Get Mew in here.
No, no, you did not. Please leave me alone, man.
It's right here, man.
He played it like
No, you
several
did
game
not.
actions ago. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Raspberry.
I'm like, okay, right now I'm in denial. I'm in the denial phase.
The Nile is a river in Egypt. Your husband is gay.
Oh my fucking god.
Yeah, this is
Play
disgusting.
canceling
I
cologne
agree,
from my
Rasper.
hand.
Rasper, I agree. We should gang up on Sam.
I'll play canceling cologne. Oh, this heavy ball should have gone to my prizes. I don't know why it didn't.
I literally hope you. I could have played Regigigas Control. I was thinking it, you know? I was literally debating to
I didn't
play.
even want to play Palkia this game. I was planning on bringing Gardevoir. Leave me alone.
No, I want. I want you literally dead. I will
I'll
literally
play
torture
Rescue
you.
Stretcher to bring Palkia V-Star, actually Palkia V, into my hand, and I will
By the way,
rebench
what
Palkia.
deck are you planning to play next week? Just asking, but what deck are you planning to play next week?
There's no idea. Like, actually, I have no
Yeah,
clue.
unfortunately,
Oh,
next week there will be no Poké-Commander match from me because I once again am not home during the weekend. I can look into maybe hosting like an offline Poké-Commander match, as in where like I'm not streaming, but I don't think I can make it work. So no promises on that end.
I'll play the Denate GX for my hand.
Oh my god, Bro's actually just straight up bench locking himself. Discarding
Okay.
N, Swin Energy, and Basic Water.
Oh, I can play my supporter now.
You haven't played
I'll
a
play
supporter yet?
Mallow.
Oh no, that's right. Misty Steer's not a
Nope.
supporter. Yeah, that's right.
And I'll use Melanie to attach a water energy to Suicune V.
Oh my god.
can't we just like crucify Sam? Can't we just like
That sounds like a good plan, Raspberry. Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, I know.
Sam has 36 cards in deck after this stupid Melanie. That's crazy.
And he
It's
have just
it's
0.
turn 3, by the
What?
way. I want you to know. I want you to know it's turn 3 for him.
But wait, there's more.
Please, be there more. I just want you to fucking deck out.
There is more somehow.
Actually, no. I think I should hold that to the next turn.
No, don't.
That's optimal.
Play all the cards. Play all the cards, okay? Play
so
it.
I'm gonna Moonlight
Play
Shuriken and
them.
knock out Mew and Ninetales, and take 2 more prize cards.
Weirdly, it isn't even that bad.
Yeah, no, it's not that bad.
Nah,
The bad part is that
bad.
you're on 5 lives. That's like the bad part, I guess.
No. If he like sniped other things, I think if he left me
Charcadet is not a threat.
Right. I'll draw for turn. I'll play
You
Poké-Pads.
know what? Actually, I think I have a plan to like genuinely destroy your board. I think I have a plan.
You got it, man.
I'll grab Pidgeot off the Poké-Pads.
Noah, can you just like kill his beacon?
I'm gonna look into it. I'll evolve into Pidgeot.
You can try.
And I'll use Quick Search. Yo, this Poké-Pad card. This Poké-Pad card is kind of good, not gonna lie.
Raspberry, you lost 2 more lives, by the way. You're on 5 now.
I'm in denial right now. We'll leave alone.
I'll add Discord to my hand from the Quick Search.
You'll add Discord to your hand? What the hell?
Discard. You dense MF.
Wait. Actually, how viable is the Discord card actually? How viable is this?
The Discord is like not very viable anymore. It kind of got power crap.
I'll attach an energy for turn onto Zapdos.
Loki, I think Reddit is like better.
I'll play Boss's Orders to boss the Suicune.
Okay.
Also, Sam, you forgot to discard 2 energy off the Greninja.
Yeah, whatever.
Alright.
Suicune is dying.
And I'll use Bolt Storm for enough. It's a 320.
Who do I push?
So Sam loses 2 lives. I get 2 prizes, which I will have to do select random. Oh, that's a really good prize to get, actually. What's the other prize I'm getting? Okay, that one is kind of whatever. Well, it's not that whatever. It's fine. Alright.
I think I still get there, which is the funny part.
Alright, Rasper, it's your turn.
Hey, cool. I'm gonna draw a card. If it lets me. Okay, it lets me, thank you. I'm gonna use a Recording ability to draw 3.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, I know, it is great. I'm gonna play down T-Bass.
I probably won't win, but I'm definitely gonna take Raspberry down with me. No, he doesn't think I
I'm
can.
gonna play Time Factory. Heat Factory, I mean.
Oh,
okay,
nice.
so Sam has a
bench.
Yeah, Sam has a discard down to bench size now. Oh no, whatever will he clear is probably just gonna be like the Tedene and then one other Pokemon, probably Palkia.
Why would I get rid of Palkia?
I don't know, man.
He's the bad. He's the next attacker. What do you mean?
Oh yeah, let's go for the Hydro Break.
No, I'm gonna play Night Stretcher and then get back Origin Form Palkia V-Star.
Heat Factory to discard the Fire Energy from my hand and draw 3.
And then I will attach, and then you play Max Elixir, and then use Subspace Swell for a knockout on Ceruledge.
No, you won't.
Wait.
Hell yeah,
Rasper.
I will.
Rasper. Wait. Oh, wait, I'm stupid. Never mind. I was about to say, like, why are you using Rose Reveal? But this is the effective. This is Heat Factory. I forgot Heat Factory was played immediately after it was played.
This guy, man. Lock in.
Please have some patience with me today. Please do.
What does have on? I mean, what does Sam have on board again?
At Terapagos, Origin Form, Palkia V, Radiant Greninja, Drizzile, Minun, and Noctowl in the active.
You can just click on his name and then you can see his board state.
Not true. But that would be like too much work, you know. I'm too lazy for this. I'm gonna use Timer Ball and just like flip the coins.
Mm-hmm. You got one hits.
Well, you played T-Bass this turn, so he can't even do anything.
Yeah. I just want to like quickly go for my deck. Make sure I have something.
You just want
Finning is winning, right? Finning is winning.
Finning is winning.
And if you want to, you can take KO off of me, Rasper.
No, I do not. I do not want.
Because I feel like KOing his Noctowl just gives him more momentum, right? That's more or less what I'm trying to say.
What? No, I want to play Twins. Leave me alone.
How much prizes does some yellow have?
Sorry, what are you saying?
How much prizes does he have? 5?
He's on 5 lives, but 6 prizes.
Wait, I should have another prize.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, you took 5 lives off of Rasper, right?
I drew the heavy ball off the prizes, and I put it back because I said, why the hell is heavy ball in my hand?
Oh, you did say that, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes more sense, okay.
I said, I swear I played heavy ball. How is it back in my hand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fair.
Like I didn't have my Ace Trainer, which I would have played.
Ace Trainer? That wasn't even... Ace Trainer doesn't even work. We both have 5 lives.
No, but Ace Trainer is not based on lives. It's based on prizes. And he has 9, and I have 6 and you have 5. So it would work.
Oh. That's fair. Whatever, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, it would.
Ace Trainer is kind of disgusting.
I might just like quickly... What the hell do I use?
What the helly?
You should kill this Boltund. Noah's gonna win.
No, I won't.
I'm thinking, man.
Can he even kill the Boltunds? Hold on. 1, 2, 3.
I don't know how many energy he's got.
He has 5 energy in this card. That's what I'm counting now.
He can't even kill my Palkia.
He does 1.
Cards probably from my hand.
But 5 energy, he's doing 130?
Yeah.
Barely kills Greninja.
I mean, he's playing Fiery Flint, so there's more to happen here, probably. Discard Squawk and Fire from the Fiery Flint to grab 4 fires from deck.
Probably gonna save some for later.
I do love that we're all playing decks that kind of work off of energies from the discard. That's kind of hype.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do really want to find a specific card this turn.
Which one? No, say it.
A card.
This is which?
He's not gonna tell us. Bro's losing. He's not gonna. Bro is losing. He's not gonna tell us what card he's missing.
I'm not losing. Me and Rasper are tied for losing.
No, we're not.
You have 5 lives. I have 5 lives. We're tied for losers. We're both giant losers.
I'm in denial right now. So like.
You're hella in denial, yeah.
Alright. How do I
gonna do
take a
something.
3-prize turn on Raspberry?
I'm gonna do something that I will probably
Oh,
regret.
Noah.
Like
Noah.
I'm
Should
gonna
I
play Downtown King B.
take a 5-prize turn on Raspberry? That'd be really
How
fun.
can you take a 5-prize turn on him?
I don't know.
I'm gonna play Downtown
Oh,
B.
how's it?
Flame Sealstone.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
I'm gonna immediately use it to like search my deck for shit.
Yep.
What is he gonna get? Boss.
Probably shit, man. Probably shit. I'm not gonna get boss actually. I'm just like
Have you
why
played
is
support
there
this
no
turn? You have not.
why is there no counter casting in this deck? Oh hell no.
I just found out how to do the turn order thing. I'm so sorry, guys. There we go. Now it's fixed.
No way. No. Where are my cards?
They're not real.
In prizes? I don't know. In
They're
Discord?
not real. No. My fucking god, bro. I'm just gonna like use battle compressor, which I'm gonna get off the for a Silkstone. Like,
Alright. Let me guess. 3 fire energy discarded.
how did
I
you
think
know you
does 3
you're
fire
upside
energy get him to the
something?
Boltund?
It gets into 9 fire energy in discard, which is 210, I
With
think.
180, 210, I think. Yeah, that kills Boltund.
Sure does.
Ain't killing Voltan. Voltan's too cool, you know.
No, you probably should. Honestly, you probably should. Because I kind of want that bench space. I kind of want the bench space, if I'm gonna be honest.
Wait, you want me to kill your Voltan? You sure?
Yeah, I kind of want the bench space.
Okay,
I
yeah,
know he's got all the comeback cards in that deck, so.
I don't
I'm
actually.
Gonna go I'm a murder Voltan, man. Thank you for this. Thank you.
Oh, you don't have any other game turn actions? Is it straight up?
No, actually, I do. I'm not just.
Oh, you do. Okay. It was just announcing that you're gonna do it at the end of turn. Okay, that's fair.
I'm gonna play Kindler.
Okay.
Kindler.
Yeah, I mean, he has a fire in hand. So his damage is now 240 on the Silver Lich. Kindler is a cool card. I like that. I don't think it saw planes when it was in standard, right? Or did it?
No, it never will. It never did it. It never will outside of Commander because this card is I legitimately shit.
It's pretty bad.
I mean, it's a funny card.
Did you see Prism Tower now? It's gonna be pretty good for Sarah Ledge.
I didn't see Prism Tower. I did see the stadium that has to be played when Prism Tower is in play.
It's discard 2 from hand, draw 1.
Oh, so it's like the Team Rocket's Porygon Z ability. That's pretty fun.
Yeah, on a stadium.
That's interesting. You don't have to show us what you're getting. You don't have to show us what you're getting.
But I will show you because I'm discarding it with Ultra Ball and I'm just gonna play it.
That's fair. So you're getting Ultra Ball Fire Energy from the Kindler? Is that what is happening? And then discarding another from hand. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Are we seeing Melodic right now?
Wait, I can play my Lotic this turn?
Yeah, your Feebas got played last turn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I forgot.
You haven't attached return. You haven't attached return yet, right?
Yeah.
Because I have Guzma in hand. If you want to abuse that.
Wait, you do?
I have Guzma in hand. Why would I tell him? Because I want to cuck you.
Oh my
I'm
god,
gonna
fake! You have down my lot if you use Guzma, which I will use like.
This is
No,
why I
actually,
asked
I
if you attached return, but oh, it doesn't matter because you have Latias, so you can just if you yeah.
yeah. If I might use your Guzma to
Yeah, do you still want to see the rest of my hand?
No, no, I just wanna see the Guzma. I don't care. Actually, I wanna
Here.
see Sam's hand. I wanna see Sam's hand.
Yeah, I'm just revealing my hand. I don't care if Sam sees it. It's not that interesting, all things considered. But I got Kuzma off the prizes, which from my last KO.
Can you not use it for now? Can you not use it for now? It would be nice.
Right, can you guys still see my hand or no?
no.
No, Buddha,
Okay, so
I will.
that concealing does work. That's interesting. But concealing my prizes?
I wanna get myself the Greninja from. Yeah, I'm gonna get the Greninja. I just want this dead. I want Greninja dead.
Can I kill Greninja?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, if you're promoting a basic Pokemon, you don't have to do that with an untap. We believe that you're promoting a basic Pokemon and then retreating with Latias. That's okay.
Yeah. I fucking hate Untap. I fucking hate.
You gonna kill Greninja?
Yeah, I want him. I want it dead.
Okay.
All right.
Poke
You get to take a
fucking
prize,
Latias,
Rasper.
please.
And don't forget to pass turn to Sam. I heard that soundboard. Yeah, awesome. Well, Sam has to promote first before deciding.
I'll promote him. Because I can.
Mine is just him, Loki.
I will then use Minim's Poke Power to draw 2.
Mm-hmm. God damn it, it's Rasper. Please be careful with your soundboard, because I can mute it at any time. Alright, Sam, what are you gonna do?
I'm gonna think.
I love how your guys' Discord battles are massive, and mine is just 11 cards.
I will play Level Ball from my hand. And off of Level Ball, I will find Lapras.
Mm-hmm.
I will put Skyfield into play, bumping Raspberry's Heat Factory.
Yeah, goes to the Lost Zone.
I'll play Lapras from my hand.
Alright, Rasper, don't forget to put the Heat Factory in Lost Zone. Yeah, thank you.
How outdated is this list?
I don't know. Were you looking for a specific supporter?
There's a specific card I want to get from a supporter.
Oh, what card is that you don't have?
Energy Recycler.
That was indeed a fairly new addition to your team. To your team? Your deck.
That is less than bueno.
Yeah, that sounds valid.
I have 1 energy in my deck.
Honestly, this sound effects kind of add to the game. Thank you, Raspberry.
Okay. What the fuck do I do now?
What supporter are you getting off Lapras? This is a little longer than 15 seconds, I think, for a game action, my guy.
Shut up, Noah. I will get Arven. And then I will play Arven.
Yep.
Get Night Stretcher. And a Pokemon Tool card. Tool card I'll get a Float Stone.
Floating Stone? What a great card. I've never seen that card in my life.
Shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is why I hate Untap. My lists are so outdated.
Yeah, that's fair.
Let me just make. I'm like 99% sure I have that in this deck. Yeah, I do. Okay. Yeah.
Alright, Sam. What is your next
Okay.
move?
I will attach an air balloon. My Minum.
Yep.
And then I'll.
Wait,
I mean,
do you not run Fluffy Berry in this deck? Or do you also run Fluffy Berry in this deck?
I run air balloon because everything I have is 2 retreat. And I do run an EX, so it's optimal.
Yeah, I guess it's fair. That's fair. Nobody runs Spide Up CX, so you're fine.
Okay, I think I just have to rip it. I'm gonna play Max Elixir. Let's find that one energy.
Did he find the energy? He's awfully quiet.
Ooh. Retro.
Rutro Raggy.
Okay, so I whiff.
Mm-hmm.
Guess I'm just gonna say fuck you, Noah.
That's fair.
We're gonna bench Ditto, Execute, and Sobble.
Okay.
Catch for turn. This list is outdated. I'm not gonna. I cannot do anything anymore. I'm out of juice. I don't have energy recycler anymore. Well, push Therapagos.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna field blower away Rasper's bodybuilding dumbbells. Cause fuck you. As well as your floats, as well as your forest seal stone.
Oh yeah, Raspberry, could you flip your V-Star marker? Because you've used your V-Star power. Yeah, the bodybuilding dumbbells goes to the discard at the lost zone.
What do I do? Deck is, yeah, I ran out of energy. I don't know. I guess I'll punch and kill Bolt Hunt if I can.
All right. Is that is that an announcement of the attack, or is that the attack itself?
Yes, that is the attack.
All right. So Bolton goes needs shit, and I lose 2 lives.
Yeah, I run Energy Recycler in this deck. It's right there.
And I'll push Pidgeot, and I will draw a card for turn. I will evolve Magneton into Magnezone, It has
So
the
I would've
ability
had
Magnetic
the-
Circuit.
I would've had. I
As
would've
often as you
had
like
it.
during your turn, you may attach a lightning energy card from your hand to one of your Pokemon.
Man, this is why I hate Untap.
I will put down Pikachu and Zekrom GX.
Pika Rom.
I unfortunately still lack the bench space to actually accelerate to the Pika ROM.
Skyfield's in play, bro.
Oh yeah, wait, we have Skyfield. You're right. You're so right. Never mind.
How do you think I
I'll
killed
bench.
the
I'll bench my Tapu Koko from Command Zone.
guy?
Play
Combo.
Hisui and Heavy Ball to get Mareep out of my prizes. I'm not sure if I want to bench that Mareep yet, but I think I will. Hello? Yeah. Alright. I still actually don't think I have enough for Attack Bolt GX. I have 4 energy in hand. This doesn't... I have to choose 2 different bench Pokemon for this, so I can get to 5 on Pikarom. This might have been... Oh wait, hold on. I am a moron. I still have Pidgeot up. Oh whoops, I did not mean to draw that.
Wait.
I still have Pidgeot up.
You soundboard again? No way. No way.
Pidgeot will grab this card. Press this letter. Which will grab me 2 lightning energies. I will attach a lightning energy to Pikarom. I will attach a lightning energy to Pikarom.
How much
I will
damage
attach
does
a
Pikarom do again?
lightning energy to Pikarom. I'll attach a lightning energy to Pikarom. I'll attach a lightning energy to Pikarom.
How much damage does Pikarom do?
How much energy are you attaching to Pikarom?
I'll use Dance of the Ancients to attach an energy from this card to Pikarom and to Miraidon. That was a hand, I see. I was about to say, where did that go?
170 to one of my opponent's bench Pokemon.
That goes back to the command zone. Alright. And then I'll...
You have to pay the command tax, don't you, to put him back in the command zone?
I'm putting him back in the command zone, and then I'm paying the commander tax.
Don't you have to pay command... okay, there it is.
To put it back in play. And then I'll use Dance of the Ancients to attach from this card to Miraidon, and attach from this card to Magnezone.
So, are you gonna kill me? With Pikarom?
I still haven't decided. Move Tapu Koko back to the command zone.
You don't even kill me with Pikarom. Unless you have Electro Power again.
No, don't worry. I'm seeing... Don't worry, I do kill stuff, don't worry.
Guzma. Oh no.
I will Guzma up to Palkia.
Dude, I have no energy. Why are you killing me? I can't even play the game.
I want to leave you at as low life count as possible.
Who are you gonna kill? Drizzile? Oh, you're just mean.
Yeah. Actually will. I will KO the Drizzile with Tag Bolt GX. And also the active Palkia, of course, for 3 prizes.
Wait, doesn't Sam have 1 life now?
Yes.
Yes, he does. I just wanted to put him at 1, just for funsies.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to lose this turn.
No, you're not.
Yes, you can there's a whole lot of stuff you can do to just kill me.
No, I won't. I won't kill you.
It's not really in his benefit to kill you. I think it's in his benefit to knock me down as well.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna murder you this turn, just so you know.
Wait, that's my hand.
Hey,
And then
Raspberry, can you not kill the Pikarom? Because I can kill the Pikarom next turn.
No, actually, can you bust it up?
Yeah, so if you gust something else, I can gust and kill Pikarom next turn.
Nice, bro. Bad, bro. Hmm. I think I should kill his Magnezone.
Yeah, that makes sense. That or the Pidgeot.
No.
that was a pretty
Pidgeot-
crazy turn,
Pidgeot-
right? Hi Shady. Hello, how are you doing? That's a lot of lightning
I
energy
don't-
in play.
I do not think Pidgeot is healing anything.
I mean, it's getting him cards.
Yeah, it's
Yes,
hitting him.
we're back to teaming up on me again. That's awesome.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
glad to
Noah,
see you're doing
you're
good.
winning.
Yeah, that's true. You're so right. It's very valid to gang up on me this time because I am indeed winning.
I
Actually,
don't have
hello.
any fucking.
I'm doing good
energy
as
left.
well, by the way, Shady. Thanks for asking.
Could
Dude,
you
I
like
wish
do
I'm so mad I don't have the right build in this freaking game.
All right. Oh,
Okay,
it's
so
Sam. It's
my
still on
turn.
your turn. Could you pass it over to me, and then I'll pass it
Oh.
over to Raspberry? Yeah.
Yeah.
Here you go.
Okay, I already drew my card. So like,
That's a lot of energy in play.
yeah.
I think this is like the exact build, except it doesn't have energy recycler for some reason.
Finally done with clinical, so you get to not be tired 24/7. Let's go, slay! Awesome. Love to see
Sam,
it.
are you sure you will be able to order? Actually, I don't think you are able to kill the Zekrom.
I need to get Pokemon onto my bench, and that's it. I need to find 2 Pokemon, but I have everything else.
Maybe it will be easier to just like, I don't know, maybe kill Magnezone or Miraidon.
Yeah, I can probably kill either of them. That makes that's fine.
Okay. And how much energy do I have in this card? Let me check.
I have no idea, honestly. I think it's enough to kill a Pikarom. I do think about that. I do think that's the case. Thank you for claiming your daily dynamic, Shady. Appreciate it.
The real question is, do I have enough Pokemon left in my deck?
I'm counting 12. I'm counting 12 fire energy in your discard, by the way.
Well, that's enough to kill Pikachu and Zekrom Tag Team GX.
Yeah. So you do 270 damage with Several Edge. Pistol Flames.
So cool, I'm alright. So cool. I'm gonna for now just play Poké to just like burn it to just see if I have any way to, maybe kill my maybe kill my fire in it. I want it dead.
I mean, you have my Lotic.
Yeah, but do you have any supporters in hand?
I have Guzma and Hala in hand, but that's not very helpful.
Yeah, no, it will be too shit for me.
Wouldn't you like to know if I had any supporters in my hand?
He can check. He's got my Lotic. He can just check.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me check, bro. Let me check.
Do you want to use my Lotic right now? Oh, he's playing
Yeah.
Hapu. Or are you getting Hapu? Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, actually, no. I'm up to play for Hapu.
Dude, Hapu is such a scuffed card. The card is.
It's Hapu's Guidance. Explorer's Guidance, am I right?
Yeah, it's Explorer's Guidance, but even worse.
How is it worse than Explorer's Guidance? It's identical.
Oh, I thought Explorer's Guidance was 5 cards.
No, it's also 6.
Okay, so I'm gonna just try to.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's just Hapu's Guidance. Okay.
Yeah. The only difference is that it's not an ancient supporter, but that's not relevant in this context.
I'm gonna try get Scorched Earth. And
Oh, you might not want to bench Sam's Stadium if you actually.
Can you not bump my stadium, please?
yeah, sure. Yeah, sure.
I'd
Because
like
you
to
don't have to.
actually be
You
able
don't
to
have to
kill
show us what cards you're getting from Apu.
Oh,
because
I
if you
don't
bump my
care.
stadium, I cannot kill Miraidon.
But I want you to kill Miraidon.
Yeah, but so if you bump, I cannot kill it
Uh,
because I need
yeah,
to have
I'm just gonna
all my.
order Zek.
Yeah.
I want
Okay,
the Zek
Zegrom's
dead.
very dead.
Yeah, Pikaram is dead. Okay. That moves to discard. I lose 3 lives. And I'll push Zapdos.
Okay.
Okay, don't forget to
Okay,
pass
let's
the turn
go.
over to Sam, Rasper. After you've taken your prizes. Because you can take 3 prizes from the Pikaram.
I'll draw for turn. That's pretty good. And I'll use Minun to draw 2 more.
And that Minun is getting so much value.
Minun is getting a lot of value. Okay, so how badly can I screw over Raspberry this turn? Because that'd be hilarious.
It's what the fuck?
No, I'm playing. Chill out. Don't get your knickers in a knot, bro. Okay. I need to gust this turn, don't I?
He likes naughty knickers. He does.
Okay,
So,
buddy.
listen, it's not a comment from me, it's a comment from chat.
So I could get Melody. I could get Suicune back up this turn, but I don't know if I can gust again. All right, no, never mind. I'm fine. Play Night Stretcher. They get Drizzile for round 2.
Oh boy.
I'll play Drizzile.
Just search your deck for trainer cards, yeah.
And I will get Boss's Orders.
Shady, there's no need to provoke Sam.
I'm not even looking at the chat.
Yeah, he isn't. He isn't looking at all. We're just playing.
I'm in the middle of a game.
It's true. It is fun. It is fun. Starting fake beef is always fun. Oh my god, Bidoof level 10. Let's go.
Eldegoss from my hand.
Oh shit. I wonder what supporter he's getting back.
I don't know.
Beefy
I'll place
Bidoof.
an order from my discard pile into my hand.
He doesn't have bench space anymore, so... Which one did you choose?
N.
Okay.
I'll play Boss's Orders. Pull up Miraidon.
Yep. That checks out.
And
I went from
will...
I went from 12 lightning energy in play to 3 lightning energy in play
So
in one
Miraidon's
turn.
gonna go the way of the dinosaur. He's dead.
Yep. And I lose 2 lives again. Do I want to push Magnezone? What's in Rasper's active? It's a Ceruledge, right? Yeah.
Okay. I pressed choose random and it just didn't take my prize cards. Okay.
I'll push Mareep. And then I'll draw my card for turn. I will use Mareep to put both your active Pokemon to sleep.
Alright. Okay. Crazy.
I know, right? Crazy. So crazy.
Alright, can we kill Noah this turn?
I'll attach to Mareep.
Attaching to Mareep? What the hell? Oh my god.
I might need to retreat this, is what I'm trying to say. I'll play Trainer's Mail. Yeah, they're trying to kill me this turn, Shady. I know. Oh, that's a pretty good card. That's a pretty good card to get. That's a pretty good card to get off of Trainer's Mail. I'll
Clement?
grab Clements,
Oh my
and I'll play
goodness.
Clements to get 1, 2, 3, 4 lightning energy out of my deck.
Well, GG, I'm dead.
I don't even know if I want to kill Sam though. That's the funny part.
Oh. I guess you. How much damage? What attack does Zapdos have?
It's Electric Ball for 110.
Okay, yeah. So you can easily kill me this turn without risking an important Pokemon.
Well, the thing is that Serapagos is active, so. And this is actually a turn where I don't have Gust.
You have Pidgeot on your board.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I have quick search.
Gust? Is Noah out of Gust? Hold on.
But remember that Clement is a supporter, so.
Oh wait, yeah. Did leave Mareep in the active? Let him die.
I think we're still fine. Yeah, Pidgeot will grab Nest Ball. Nest Ball will grab me Raikou V.
Raikou V. Oh, he can kill Terapagos this turn anyway.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide if I want to kill Terapagos or Sterilage.
There's no way you can kill Sterilage.
I have 6 Pokemon in play. Rasper has 5 in play, so that's 11. So that's 20 to 40. Yeah, missing 30 damage for that, unfortunately.
So you can definitely kill me, but you know. You could just punch Rasper. That'd be funny.
Oh, this is tough.
You could just Gust and then Clutch Lock.
No. I think I can. I think I can kill it. I think I can kill it.
You think you can kill Sterilage this turn? There's no
Yeah, because I can rescue Stretcher from a Rhydon.
Oh, he does get there.
And then I'll bench Miraidon. Hold on, I'll bench Miraidon. Yeah, because I now have 7 Pokemon on bench.
You get one
and
more.
I'll use Miraidon to bench a basic Lightning Pokemon from my deck. And I'll choose Minun as that basic Lightning Pokemon. I'll use Minun to draw 2 cards.
Do you have Electro Power in your hand?
No, I get there now, right?
No. You're short 20.
Am I?
You're short 10. No, wait, you have that Zapdos in play. Never mind, you're there.
Yeah, I have 8 Pokemon on bench now, so I'm there, right?
Yeah, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7 plus 5.
So hold on.
Yeah, you're there.
Yeah, so I can retreat Mareep into Raikou. Hold on, Mareep. Can we?
No.
Gonna remove the highlight on Mareep because I want to evolve the Mareep into Fluffy.
You just put Sterilage. You can just re-evolve Sterilage and knock out Raikou, and then I can just kill it.
I'll use Dynamotor to attach a lightning to Miraidon.
Sam, would you
I'll
don't
use.
understand that thing? I do not want you
I'll
killing.
I'll attach some more lightning energy.
You want Noah to win?
No.
Like that.
It's just that I don't want you to kill Noah. I want to kill Noah, and I won't let you kill Noah, okay?
Okay, fine, I won't kill Noah.
Okay.
That's not that deep.
I'll draw one card off of the fleet-footed.
Thing is, your board is
And then
pretty bad.
I'll KO the Several Edge for 2 prizes.
Fine.
You have 5 lives and Sam has 1.
It's my turn, isn't it?
It is your turn, yeah.
Raspberry has a whole lot of cards in hand. Jesus. 14 in hand?
Oh my god, Stormy Mantis is my last prize. That's crazy. Anyway, let me unhighlight all my shit.
Okay.
Okay, Raspberry, don't forget to put yourself to 3 lives. Also, Sam forgot to pass his turn again, so if we can just pass again. There you go. Oh, here's still a highlight here.
Like, why am I having cards review? What? Did I like forget? Oh yeah, I did forget to shuffle. I did.
Don't mind me, by the way. I'm just making some more bench space. Not that I need it specifically, but like
So
just
either
organizing
Noah
everything.
loses this turn or he wins because you don't have any backup attackers, Raspberry.
You hear the scheming, yeah. I love the politics. They plan to kill, so if they can't kill it,
Because
yeah.
if you kill me this turn, he can just re-knock out your Sarah Ledge with Raikou. But if you kill Raikou and I kill him, he's dead.
No, he isn't killing me.
He can re-knock out. He can re-kill your.
Why are you spreading lies? He can't kill me. He literally can't.
No, because he has 1 less bench space. Or 1 less Pokemon on bench, so.
And yet, you still haven't played your Electro Power Recycler or whatever it's called.
I have played Electro Power literally on like turn 2.
Not the other one, the thing that gets it back.
Too bold of you to assume I run that.
I'm gonna pay my commander tax.
I saw it in the deck profile.
You saw it in the deck profile? Wait.
Yes.
Wait. Wait. I'm like 95% sure it's not there.
I swear I saw Electro Charger in your deck.
There's there's no Electro Charger in this list, no.
Mm.
There isn't. By the way, Rasper, don't forget to put yourself to +1 on the commander text, just so we it's like the 0 counter goes to 1. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna pay it and it now goes to 2.
Yeah, that's fair. So the fire energy from hand goes to bottom of deck. It's 1. It's not 2. It's 1.
Oh, I thought it's.
No, it's 1.
No, I said I'm gonna set it to 1 because I'm gonna literally pay another time and attack. It's gonna be 2.
Well, it's gonna be moved to 2 if Sarah Ledge leaves play again, and you decide to go to put it to command zone. So not yet. Yeah. This is a close game though. I like this. It's a close game.
I'm gonna play my stadium. Scorched Earth to pump your stadium.
Yeah. So that means that Sam has to bump down and then I have to bump down? Is that correct? Has Sam played it? Yeah, but Sam has to bump down first is what I'm trying to say. Or do we bump down at the same time? That's a little awkward.
It doesn't fucking matter. I'm dying. He's just gonna kill me.
That's fair. Removing Zapdos. Removing Skitty. For me, it does matter though. What's the other one that
Yeah,
I'm
it
gonna
does
put
matter for
down?
you because you can't kill Ceruledge anymore because you're just done. You're done, pal. You'll lose.
Hmm. Hold on.
No, it definitely does not have an answer.
I'm gonna put
Yeah,
my nun
don't
back.
do.
I mean, he's bench locked.
Wait, I'm gonna quickly use rescue stretcher to get my single shark cadet back into play. He cool like that. He very cool like that. Shark cadet's cool. Also, I'm gonna use yes seeker.
Okay.
To use my rockets admin to put Noah to 0 count.
Oh no! Noah
Wait.
down to 0.
Wait, I'm down to 1. I have 1 prize.
Ah,
Yeah, same difference.
It's Rocket's admin, right? So it's shuffle into deck and then
yeah, rockets admin.
yeah, okay. So it's not to bottom, it's shuffle into deck. Okay, yeah.
Also, wait, hold up. I'm just gonna before everything happens. I'm just going to attach the soulstone in my be cool like that. Very cool. Like
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Shuffle, and then I draw 1. Okay.
Well, now I just have nothing.
That kind of complicates things.
Yeah, nice. How's that 1-card hand looking, Noah?
Yeah, not that great. How's your 1-card hand looking?
I have
Oh,
3
you have
cards in my
3.
hand
Oh,
that
you
are
have 3.
completely useless.
You have 3. True, it's
I
true.
have a Power Glass and Ditto.
You want to know what my
Ditto.
card in? You want to know what my card in hand is?
I have
It's Quick
Bidoof,
Ball.
not
I have Quick Ball in hand
That's-
here.
That's not that bad.
oh,
I mean, I'm
order,
bench locked. I'm bench locked though.
I'm gonna actually kill the turtle.
And there I go.
Yeah, bye. You ain't killing Noah.
Poor
No
Sam.
shit.
I wouldn't let you do it anyways.
Dude, my turn order was gonna be Timer Ball, find Inteleon and play and use Amnesia. That was gonna be my turn. I was gonna get my 1 water energy and use Amnesia. That was my turn.
Oh.
Alright. Hey, please pass the turn, Rasper.
I have
Yeah.
perished.
Thank you. I will draw cards. I will Quick Ball my Puffin to find a card in my deck. A basic Pokemon. Not like any basic Pokemon I specifically want. I mean, I'll grab the Dene. I am bench locked, but still. Okay, so the Dene goes to hands. I will use Fleet-Footed to draw cards. That's a great card. Fun, yay.
Be right back.
I'll use Quick Search. Oh shit! He said be right back. Right as I guess I could take my time on this Quick Search then.
And Noah win? That is
Yeah.
the question.
I'm trying to think if there's like a cool play I can make.
Kill Ceruledge, boss kill something. That's the play.
That's what I'm. That's the low. That's a low to the ground play that I can do. Yeah.
That's the winning play.
I mean, it gets him to 1 life, not 0. So.
Well, if you kill Ceruledge and then you just boss something.
Well, I can't kill Ceruledge. Just thing.
Yes, you can.
Wait, what? No, it can't be, right?
No, I can't kill Cerulege. I do 220 with Raikou.
You
And I
have
also do
more
220.
options than just Raikou.
I'm bench locked, remember?
He's not a knower.
I'm not a knower. That's crazy. I don't run Pokemon pickup because that's cringe. I guess I'm just grabbing this, I guess. I will use Fluffy's Dynamotor to accelerate a lightning energy
Just tell me,
to
did you already
Miraidon.
do? Did you already play the quick search? Did you already?
Yeah, I used Quick Search, yes. And the action I took after Quick Search is this attachment from Electro Power from Dynamotor to the Miraidon. Let me just move this away a little bit so it's clear that Miraidon has 3 energy.
Okay, freak it, I'm expecting the game.
I'll Lysander up the Oricorio GX.
Okay.
And I'll swing with Lightning Rondo for the knockout for 2 prizes. And 2 lives.
Okay, and I'm just gonna go back and KO your Raikou, okay? I just really want to go fast. I want to watch the Dark Championships with my dad, you know.
Okay, we both go to 1 life.
Yeah.
Yep. I push Miraidon, a draw card for turn, and I'll quick search. Well, yeah. The thing is, I can still quick search for VS Seeker, which can VS Seeker boss for on the Talonflame or anything else for the KO.
Okay, thank you. Bye. Nice game it was. Okay, I'm sad.
GG.
Bye.
GG. Oh, that felt so good.
All right,
Actually,
are we running another
winning.
one?
We could try to do a 1v1 one. Yeah, sure. And we can actually play on PvP tabletop. Yeah. Let's try and squeeze one in. Thanks for playing Raspberry. I think Raspberry already left, but that's okay.
Full deck builder.
Copy text.
I'm not gonna play Gardevoir. That would take too long.
Whoops, that's not the room I wanted to make. Can I leave the room, please? Oh yeah, here. Leave room. Yeah. Let's do PC. Let's call it PCM Sunday, just like always. Move Tapu Koko to Lost Zone. What is the button to shuffle my deck? That's S. Yeah, okay. Okay. You want heads or tails, Sam?
I want tails.
Right, it's heads. I'll choose to go first.
Alrighty.
I'll open this and prize my top 10 cards. Oh, whoops, that's 11. There you go. Alright, you ready to go?
Yep.
Good luck with fun. Draw for turn. That's a nice draw for turn, I guess. Boltons. I'll Trekking Shoes. Oh, whoops. No. You, the top 1. I will discard that to draw cards.
This client is so much better already.
It's so much better. Quick Ball away Magnezone EX. Or Fan Rotom. It's so much better, bro. Use Fan Rotom to get. Oh shit! All my other colorless stuff is prized. Oh whoopsie! I guess I shouldn't have discarded.
Fan Rotom in this?
I guess I shouldn't have discarded that Skitty, because this is the only 2 colorless Pokemon that I can grab off this.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little awkward. Oh no, it's fine. I'll bench Ditto and use Ditto to bench a Skitty from this card.
I guess that's doing something.
Attach lightning energy to bolt-on V for turn, and I'll pass.
Alright, I'll draw for turn.
Or it doesn't look messy.
Okay.
Exactly. It still
Wow.
looks easier to you to see everything. Oh yeah. This is so much
Okay,
much better.
Rocket's admin since I can't do anything.
That's honestly very valid. That's very valid. Unfortunately, we can only use this interface if we're actually doing 1v1 games. Because as you can see, it's not supported for more than 2 players.
And I'll pass.
That's crazy. Holy shit. I'll draw a card for turn. Let's see. How do I want to do this?
We might be able to get another game after this one. This is going pretty quick. Actually, wait, no. Instead of passing, I'm gonna put Commander into play and attach energy. Hold on.
Okay, then the game is not over. Then the game is not over. Okay, because I think I would have been able to donk if you.
No, I don't.
Because I have Egen in hand.
Okay, but we can still. There's. Yeah, you made the format, dude. Do you not know
Oh shit!
your own
That's
rules?
draw 5. Fuck. My bad. Sorry. Hold on.
Noah made the format and doesn't even know the rules.
What do you mean doesn't even know the rules?
If you killed Ditto, I would have just been able to bench a new Pokemon.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. It never comes up, but you're so right. Attach the Magnemite. Retreat Magnemite for 1. Evolve into Magneton. Hello. Evolve into Magneton, not trigger the Pokepower. Bench Rotom V. Play Gladion. Oops. Put Gladion in the prizes and unprize.
Is he gonna
Discard. Use Luxury Ball. What do I want to grab off Luxury Ball? I'll grab Pidgeotto. That's fine. Wait, what? No, not Pidgeotto. Sorry, I'm throwing. Hold on. I meant Delcatty. I will use Delcatty's ability to discard an energy card from my hand and draw 3. And then I'll use Bolt Storm to knock out the.
Oh, he's gonna go for Bolt Storm.
For 1 prize.
If I get there, this will be the funniest thing of all time.
If he gets there. Sorry, by the way, Ditto goes to Lasso, not to.
Yeah, whatever.
Discards. It does matter. It certainly does matter.
Not really. In the grand scheme of things, now.
In the grand scheme of things, you're correct.
I will rip Irida.
Alright.
Where is the item I'm looking for?
Maybe it's priced. Who knows?
It would appear so.
Yes, let's go.
Right there.
Oh, fuck. Oh, it's Boffin, okay.
That is the wrong card. I want Ninja in my hand and Irida to the discard.
Yeah, that's valid. Place Boffin to bench 2 70 HP Pokemon from his deck. 70 HP or less. Why are you grabbing Famrotom?
You know, that's a great question.
Yeah.
You just often discard, and I will get the Pokemon that I actually wanted, which is this one.
Yep.
And this one.
Hoothoot and Minun. Yep, okay.
Sobble into play. I'll mine them for 2.
Yep.
And then I'll Radiant Greninja for 2.
Yep. Discard 1 energy to draw 2 cards.
Oh. I can still get there.
Why did I even bench the Rotom V? That was not smart.
I'll get
I'm
him.
low-key reading Magneton's attack here. Hold on. That's really funny. Is that good here? No, but that's really funny.
Get Suicune V. That's a full bench.
Mm-hmm. Level ball, yeah.
But do I even want to get off level ball?
Looks to me like you probably should have held it for next turn.
Not like I
Badu!
can do anything. Attach return. And I think I'll just have to punch.
For 150.
Or 150.
Right. Let me double check. Yeah, for 150. Right, I'll draw a card for turn.
No, I'd win.
I'll put Tapu Koko in play from
That
Command
attack.
Zone. I'll use Dance of the Ancients to accelerate 1 to Van Rotom, 1 to Magneton to put him back in the Command Zone, increasing his commander cost by 1.
Okay.
I'll attach Speed Lightning Energy to Magneton to draw 2 cards. Do I want to play that? This is really funny. I'll manually attach to Delcatty. I'll use Energy Draw to discard a Lightning from my hand to draw 3. Nice. I'll bench Magnemite. I'll Guzma up the Hoothoot.
That's just rude.
Pushing Magneton. And I'll swing with Electric Blast for the KO, discarding none of my energy.
Okay. I see.
That was funny.
I'll draw for turn.
That was a funny turn. I like that.
You messed up, pal. I'll draw 2. I'll conceal cards to draw 2. Yeah, you're cooked, pal.
Oh my god. You can even draw one
Back
off the
it up.
Fleet-Footed.
And I will draw one off of Fleet-Footed. Thanks for telling me. Okay, how do I sequence
Wait, why is
this?
there one... Sorry. There's 1 energy on a Delcatty, but I meant to attach that to the Magneton, otherwise the Magneton couldn't stack. Give me a sec. This was supposed to go here, the attachment return. My bad.
Okay, so I need 2 cards. Hmm. What do I need to do?
That's a good question. What do you need to do?
Well, I need to get some items, some cards, or I could just play safe and not gamble. I think I should do that.
Mm-hmm. Spell for Palkia. Arven. Search your deck for an item card and a tool card. Which will be an EXP share.
And item. Where is it? Prized. That's where it is.
Yikes. Timer ball. Gotcha. EXP share there. Timer ball for double tills.
That's why
Awesome.
I didn't want it in the prize card. Catch return. Retreat. Of course, my evolution instance was fucking prized.
F. That's a big F.
Actually, wait, can I not retreat? Hold on.
Yeah, sure.
I play Gladion for turn. Wait, I'm lucky. I lucky throwing. But it's too late.
Too little, too late.
It's not even prized. I just didn't see it. Oh no. Yeah, I'm actually just fumbling. I'm playing too fast. Play dive ball.
Dive ball for Drizzle, I'm assuming.
What? Hold on.
Is Drizzle even in your deck? If that's the Pokemon you're searching for?
It's in my deck. Where's my evolution instance? Vase?
Is it perhaps in your hand?
No. It's not even in my deck list. Where'd it go?
Is that the card you cut for Energy Recycler?
No.
Oh my god.
Where did it? How did it get? How did it get in here? Where did it? How did it not? What? Okay. Anyways, it's all over the place. It might have just gotten discarded by. It might have just gotten removed by accident. Evolve into Drizzile. Yeah. I'll get Prime Catcher and kill the Bolt and bring up Boltund. See, I could have just gotten that off of Arven, but I wanted to use Drizzile so I could get Inteleon, but I just didn't realize that Drizzile was just not real.
Yep.
And I'll kill Boltund.
Yep. For 2 prizes. Push Delcatty. Because this thing has free retreat. It doesn't, never mind. Okay, never. Okay, I'll stick with it. Draw card for turn. I'll bench Pikarom.
Scuffed our game.
Attach Lightning to Pikarom. Use Energy Draw to discard Energy and draw 3. Evolve into Magnezone. Evolve this one into Magneton. Play Guzma and Hala. Discard Zapdos. And Electric. I don't have a special energy in my deck anymore. What are the other 2 that I get to search again? It's Tool and Stadium, I think, if I recall correctly.
Stadium.
Yeah. So let me just move this to discard in advance.
There's no way he gets a Pikarom this turn.
So I get Stormy Mountains and Floatstone.
If I get tag bolted this turn, I think I'm just gonna quit. Like Loki.
You're not getting tech bolt this turn. Don't worry. Don't worry.
There's no way he finds 5 energy this turn.
Yeah, I have 0 energy in hand, unfortunately. I can do a really funny play. Don't think it's worth it though. Maybe it is. Maybe I should just go for it, just for tempo purposes.
But you can attack with Magneton? You're gonna... That's the only... Oh, I guess you could attack with... No, Fan Rotom doesn't kill anything important. Yeah, you could Thunder Blast me.
I'm gonna Prime Catcher up the Radiant Greninja.
Radiant Greninja. And you're gonna risk Magnezone.
No. I think I will, yeah. Let me just attach the Floatstone to Delcatty before doing that. And yeah, I'll use Thunder Blast to discard this Lightning Energy and KO the Radiant Greninja.
Cool, I'll push Suicune. I'll draw turn. I'll Fleet-Footed. And I'll mine them for 2 more. Use Night Stretcher. Get Radiant Greninja. And I'll discard energy off of Radiant Greninja and draw 2.
Yep.
Dude, this is actually ridiculous. Where's all my search cards?
Book Gear.
View top 7, not view all. Her.
Who's her?
Melody.
Oh, I didn't see the card, but I believe you.
I'll use Guzmahala. There she is.
Discard Melanie, yeah.
I'm not discarding Melanie. I was just showing you that she is in fact.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
I will be discarding Badoo.
That's fair. And area 0. To get Swin Energy, and Air Balloon, and a Stadium. No Stadium.
The Stadium's on the board.
Wait, but you have to discard 2 cards for Guzman-Hala.
Oh, I do? Oh,
yeah.
Okay, I can.
I thought you discarded Area 0 from hand. There you go.
No, I would not do that.
Yeah, I was a little confused. I was a little confused,
Area
but that makes sense.
Into play. Rather inconvenient. Since I don't have any search cards in this deck, apparently.
Awesome.
I'll retreat, and I'll kill Magnezone.
Right. Push Delcatty, and draw for turn. I'll bump the Stadium.
Rude.
Attach return on.
I don't even know why.
Pikarom.
What am I doing?
Play Poké-Pads.
Get the other guy, other Magnezone. Surely you have both of them, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna grab this Magnezone though.
Magnezone.
Evolve it to Magnezone.
What does that one do?
And play the Energy X to discard my hand and draw 6. Ditto Prism Star is one of the cards in hand, so I'm discarding all my Stadiums. Discarding all my Stadiums. Hold on,
Is
let me
that
just pull
actually all
my...
your stadiums?
No, I just discarded 2, and I think I run 3, and the third one is on board. So I think, actually, I think I only run 3 stadiums, right? Yeah, I do.
Cool. I'll play
Wait,
Skyfield
why
then,
is
so then
this?
you can't get rid of it.
Huh? Wait,
Huh?
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 Poké-Pad is back in my hand. Did I not discard it?
Move Pokemon from table to
Hold
deck.
on.
Yeah, you moved it from the into the deck, not into the discard.
Ah, oops, that's my bad. I'll just draw an
And then
additional one.
somehow
Then.
it's back in your hand.
Well, if you move it to deck, it's always top of deck. So.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you drew it off the Dene. That makes sense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not getting tag bolted this turn either.
Mm-hmm.
How fun.
Yeah, I can't really do much here, unfortunately.
Fortunately. Full blitz.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
Push fan Rotom.
I'm trying to think on how to, if I can actually like abuse the magnetic draw. I don't think I can play a card in my hand at the moment. Well, I can. Hold on. I'll play Dual Ball. Okay, cool. I wanted to not grab any Pokemon anyway, so that's fine.
Wait, doesn't Dual Ball go to bench?
No. It goes to
Oh, it
hands.
goes to hand.
Yeah. And then I'll
Wow, lucky you.
magnetic draw for 1. Well, I wasn't gonna grab any Pokemon anyway, even if I grabbed flipped heads.
Yeah, you.
And then I will energy draw to discard this for 3. It's max elixir. Oh, oops. View the top 6. Is of course an energy here. Awesome.
What, the Dene?
I'm thinking of potentially going for Tingly Return here.
Tingly Return? Oh, heck no. That's crazy. Tingly Return would be crazy.
No, I'll retreat into Pikarom. I'll boss Suicune V, or sorry, Lysander Suicune V. And I'll full blitz for the knockout, search my deck.
Blitz.
I can. I have Thunder Mountain in play.
Attached.
I have Thunder Mountain.
Oh, boo. Forgot about that.
Yeah. I get to search my deck for 3 lightning energy cards attached to one of my Pokemon. So boop, boop, boop. Now let's move them to the table. Do I want to attach them to the Pikarom though? No, I'm gonna attach them to Magnezone. Right. Your turn.
Thunder Mountain, some bullshit.
Yeah, no, that is a bullshit stadium, I agree.
Okay, what the fuck do I want to do this turn?
Oh wait, I think I took 1 prize card, right? But I'm supposed to take... But I didn't take any prize cards yet. Never mind. Right? Did I take any prizes yet?
Who have you killed? You
Suicune?
killed Hoot Hoot and Suicune, so you should have taken 3 total, right?
No, I killed something else, right? I killed Ditto Prism Star, so...
Oh yeah, you killed Ditto, so you should have...
And I killed Greninja as well. No, I killed Ditto, then Hoothoot, then Greninja, then...
You should be taking 2 more.
Yeah, I just didn't take my prizes yet from the Suicune. That's what happened.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll play Melody.
Melody.
That's... Just shut up. Stop talking.
There's Bulky V-Star. Capaciosa Bucket. I love how water has so much energy surge. I feel like this deck probably gets an attacker every time, so Rotom V might be useless in this deck.
Do I get there? Do I have enough? 2. Hold on. 20 for each bench Pokemon. I could get 10 in. No. I'd be 1 damage short.
Yes, Pikarom does has 240 HP.
And
Reminder.
well, I get there now. Play Skyfield for my hand.
Well, no, but if you attack with Palkia, you already have enough. You do exactly 240.
270. Oh wait, I thought you had 270 for some reason.
No, I have 240. I was about to say, like, huh? What is he talking about? You always kill. I mean,
I don't know. I probably had freaking sterile edge math in my head.
that's fair. Anyway, hold on. I'll just move this to Lost Zone, the thing, and I'll.
There are so many cards in my hand. What do I do? What do I do with all of these?
How can I hold all these cards?
There's so much in my fucking hand. What do I do with these? Subspace Swell.
Your Palkia isn't even inactive yet. Oh wait, sorry.
Okay.
I thought that was the name of the attack. My bad.
Oh, I meant Star Portal.
Yeah. Okay. I was not tripping, I guess.
Is there anything else I want? I have no search cards. I can't get anything that I want. Battle Compressor.
Mm-hmm.
I know. Incredible cards right there.
Yep. Yuppers.
Flash Trumpet.
I'm
just getting
honestly
out of my
bro,
head most.
Bro, you could have retreated into Palkia and then Glass Trumpeted for 2.
With what energy?
Oh, is there no more water energy in discard? Oh, there isn't, I guess. Okay. Well, never mind then.
Retreat into Palkia, and I will blow up your Poké-Commander.
Yeah.
And I'll take 3 prize cards.
Push Delcatty.
And then he's going to push Magnezone. Oh, well, you're going to blow me up with Magnezone, I assume.
Bench Minun. Use Minun to draw 2. That's return to Jidene. Play Gladion. Or discard. Move you to Rises. Attach for Sealstone. Use for Sealstone. To grab discard. Play Letter. Get 2 lightning energies from my deck into my hands. Use energy draw to discard a lightning and draw a tree. Oh shit!
What?
Uh-oh. I wanted to view my discard, but I clicked shuffle all from discard.
Oh no.
Fuck. That's a problem. That's a big problem. Let me remember what I played. Let me remember what I played.
wish
It
there was
was
undo.
this Magnemite, this Magneton. This, what Magnezone was it again that you
Review the
killed?
VOD.
What Magnezone was it again that you killed? I don't remember. But you didn't kill
Oh,
him.
Magnezone?
You killed the Magneton, that was what it was.
I killed Bolton and I killed Tag Bolt.
Yep. Zapdos was also in discards.
You can just check the VOD and see what was exactly in there if you need
No,
to.
that's okay. I can remember, don't worry. Usman
Do you
Hala
remember
was
exactly
there.
how many energy there were?
No, but I remember the discard pile count, which was 36.
All of your stadiums are there.
Boss was there.
Stadiums
Dual
are
Ball was
gone.
there. E-Gen was there. Luxury Ball was there, pretty sure. Poké-Bat was there. Prime Catcher and Letter. Skyfield, Stormy Mountains, Speed. Let's see. We're now on 17. There's no way. No. There has had to be more. Oh yeah, the electric was in discards. It was like a lot. There was like at least 5 energy in discards. What else was in discards? I don't remember. Yeah. Fuck. Was it 36 or was it 26? I don't recall. No, it was 26. Okay, yeah. It was 26. So the cards we're missing are 3 lightnings.
Really?
That feels
Is
right.
it that many?
No, it's not. It's not that many. No, you're right. It's like, I think it's this much, like 6 lightning in discards from what I recall. But what else did I use? Oh yeah, I discarded Nest Ball off of the Dedenne, and I think I discarded another Ball Search off of the Dedenne. I think it was a level ball. I don't fully recall.
Did you play the swimming heavy ball?
Did I play a Sweet Heavy Ball? I don't think so. Right? I don't recall. I don't think so. I don't think I did. I played Gladion as my... I played Gladion twice during this game. I think this is about it. Yeah, okay. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, my turn. Shit. Fuck. I think I attached... Yeah, I did attach return. Oh yeah, I wanted to inspect my Discord because I was debating on playing Night Stretcher. But I'm not gonna do that. Push Magnezone.
Why would you click down and click view all if you can just click on the discard to show them?
Oh, you can do that too. Oh, I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, just
And
click
I'll
on the
use Lost Burn. Lost zoning this energy from Fan Rotom. And these 2 from the Magnezone to KO the Pokémon for 2 prizes.
Yeah, okay, we're back on track. Yeah.
Alright. My hand is so big. Like I have like almost 0 gas in here.
Yeah, there's so much happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna bench you.
Damn.
Just in case
Wellspring
someone
Mask
tries some
Ogerpon.
shenanigans. Attach return to Mr. Wellspring Mask Ogerpon.
Oh, I know what I forgot. Sorry. Hold on. Can I still bench as Mareep? That's the thing I forgot to do.
Sure.
Because of Skyfield. Yeah.
Means very little difference to me.
Thank you, thank you.
There is so much in my hand. Whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm probably gonna win next turn. I'll
Yeah,
commune my
probably.
Shuriken Minum and Delicati for 2 prize cards.
Yep. I'll draw for turn. Bench Mantine. Use power circulation to put energy on top of my deck. And this takes 10 damage.
Mantine. Hell yeah. I love Mantine.
Max Elixir. I wonder if I actually will find energy off of this. Ooh, that's crazy. That's had
Does
to
it
Van
matter?
Rotem.
No, it doesn't. I need to discard 2 energy off my Greninja.
Evolve into Fluffy. That's not evolving into Fluffy. Give me a second. I kind of have to do this. I think I'll manually attach to the Magnezone.
You got hand disruption?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to think of what I want to play before using it. Yeah, fuck it. We ball. Rock Sapman. Draw a tree. And I'll use Lost Burn, Lost Zoning the energy off Fan Rotom, and
You're
one
not
energy
gonna
off.
magnetic draw?
Oh wait, that is an option. Hold on. I will do that draw tree and then use that for 2 Lost Zones for the knockouts. And let me just once again put the Tapu Koko back in its spot. There we go.
How much damage am I doing right now?
120.
Yep. Oh, capturing Aroma.
For an evolution.
I'll get a... Yep. That should wrap up the game.
Probably, unfortunately.
Or 2 trainer cards.
Magnezone is actually a pretty decent attacker, crazily enough.
Which
I was thinking of adding the Raikou in this deck that does more damage if there's lightning energy in the Lost Zone. I think it was like 30 for 2 energy and then plus 90 if there's a lightning energy in the Lost Zone, something like that. I don't recall. I'll look it up after this game. Anyway, I do think you probably have game here.
Let me check my discard. Yeah.
You just grab Energy Switch Aqua Patch here there. Yeah.
Yep. And I attach.
Yeah, you got it.
Ogerpon, and I play Boss from my hand.
Oh, you don't. You didn't even need to.
Why?
You didn't even need to Boss. Because Ogerpon does 120 to bench as well.
Yeah, but Magnezone has 140 health.
Yeah, but it snipes 120 on one of the bench Pokemon, the Ogerpon. If you get Energy Switch Aqua Patch.
2 prizes to take.
Oh, right. I thought it was 1 prize. My bad. Yeah, okay, then the boss seals it up. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Is that the last one?
This is the last one. I'm probably gonna go sleep, but
right.
Let me just look at the Raikou that I was talking about. It's not this new one. This new one is also pretty cool. Like 2 lightning for 30. If you have at least 4 lightning energy in play, the attack does 90 more damage. That's not a bad attacker, I think, right? 120 for 2 energy if you have 2 energy elsewhere. It's a single pricer, so... This is the one that I meant. Like, yeah, if you have the exact same, like I said, 1 lightning, 1 colorless for 30. If you have any lightning energy cards in the lost zone, this attack does 90 more damage.
Yeah, that works with the Magnezone pretty well.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what I probably will cut for this. I feel like Rotom V is kind of useless in this list. I'm going to be completely honest. You can probably get a lot of attacks going very soon.
Raikou from SW would be pretty funny.
Raikou from SW. Hold on.
Mm-hmm.
That's... Hold on. Raikou from SW. That's Call of Legends. Thunder Rumble. Once during your turn, when you attach a lightning energy card from your hand to Raikou, put 1 damage counter on one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Just a 1 damage ping. I'm assuming that's probably not it. 3 lightning for 50. Discard 3 cards from the top of your deck. This attack does 50 damage plus 10 more damage for each lightning energy card you discarded. Then attach those lightning energies to one of your Pokemon. That's pretty funny with Mantine, that you can guarantee at least 1.
Yeah. If you got like Mantine and then Cypher, that's all 3 energy. So you do.
Well, you have to cipher first and then Mantine.
Yeah, well, same difference.
Yeah. That means if you do that, you could do 80 damage and then accelerate 3.
Attach 3 with 30 damage ping from attaching, and you have a Magnezone for your.
But it says once during your turn.
Oh.
When you attach a lightning from. Yeah, I feel like the Electrofall Raikou is probably better.
Really? Shocker.
I think I can probably cut Zapdos from this list. Zapdos is like not that good.
That Raikou seems fun. I'd play. That's a card I'd play.
The Lost Mirage or the Electrofall? Or both?
The Thunderclimb one.
Oh, yeah. The Secret
Fun
Wonders
card.
one. It is a fun card, yeah. Honestly, what I've discovered from here is that Delcatty is kind of goated.
It's a discard 1, draw 3. I don't know why you're surprised.
It's so good. It's unfortunate it has 70 HP only. If it had like 100, it would have been way better.
It's like the same boat as Ninetales and all that other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But Delcatty became slotted into any deck, not just fire decks. That's really cool. Anyway, I think this list is actually like not bad. Low-key.
It's one of the better ones.
Yeah, I'm not sure if like
I'm better. I'm built different.
I'm not sure if I am a complete fan of the 1/1 Fluffy on top of the 1/1 Electric, but
the Electrics weren't even really. Electric and Fluffy didn't really do anything.
Well, Fluffy did multiple things in game 1, and a little bit of things in game 2. But I priced like Dynamo in both games, so
Do you
Electric.
really need it for the acceleration? Like you have Magnezone, you have Pika-Rom.
I have Tapu Koko. Yeah.
It
felt a little overkill. It felt a little overkill, yeah, for sure.
Oh, there's a. Let me hold on. Let me find the card I'm thinking of.
The card that you haven't seen, one of the cards that you haven't seen, by the way, yet.
Rotom MD. That would be pretty good for your deck.
Rotom from Mysterious. No, that's not. It's called. Rotom from MD.
It's Gen 4. I don't know what set.
Oh yeah, it's Mysterious Dawn. Dual Trans. Search your discard pile for up to 2 basic energy cards and attach them to one of your. Holy shit, for 0?
Yeah, for 0.
Oh damn. Okay.
That's pretty good because then you can keep your energy attachment for turn.
That's actually not bad, yeah.
It's kind of just bolt on, but you can save your energy attachment.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely cutting the Dynamo Electric for at least that.
Oh, bolt on starts your deck, but it's still same difference.
Yeah. I feel like I want
have,
both.
Like battle compressor and stuff in here.
You definitely want both. And I guess now that the deck space is open, I can maybe like add the Electrike that recovers cards. I cut that initially because I felt it was too slow, but it might actually be alright. Sniff out Electrike.
You should get the Electro Power Recover card.
Oh yeah, Electro Charger. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. It shuffles into it shuffles into deck though. That's like really awkward.
Have you seen that Smoochum's getting played in decks now?
Yeah. In post-road decks, yeah, I've seen that. It's really funny. It's decent card. Acceleration, yeah. It was a good card, but not in a format where Gardevoir was a better card. Wait, there's a fire type and a water type Smoochum. What the fuck? I mean, I can see the water type, sort of.
The water type is part ice type, so that makes sense.
Yeah. I guess I was just surprised. You know, I've been kind of thinking of making an expanded deck with like the Fluffy Pillow Mareep and then the Jinx EX from 151.
Yeah, that could work.
I think that's pretty funny.
Just setting people sleeping.
Yep.
Did you see the new Poltergeist?
The new what?
The thing that evolved from Phantom.
Oh, Trevenant.
Not Phantom. Not hold on. The Gorgeist. That guy.
Oh, the better Rondo, but it's a stage 1. Yeah. Or sort of better. Like the guy that does 30 plus 50 for each bench Pokemon that has damage counter?
For each damage counter your bench Pokemon.
It's friendly bench Pokemon, right?
It's the Syrian Zoroark.
Yeah, okay.
But for 1 energy now, so. Sucks that whatever it's called is rotating. A Dodrio.
It does suck, but we have Risky Ruins.
And Risky Ruins ass. Okay, I'm gone.
Why is Risky Ruins ass with that deck? You can just buff in for 2 things and they get damage.
But then you have to find your stadium instead of Pokemon.
I mean, yeah, you're right. Maybe it has some merit in Commander where we can also use the Gengar that yeets itself from the discard to the bench and damages itself. Maybe that has potential. Unsure. Anyway, I'll be wrapping up here for now. Is there anyone cool that we can rate? There probably is. Now let me just take a look. But thanks for playing today, Sam. Yeah, I know you're not in the call anymore, but thank you for playing. I appreciate you tons. Let me see. Who can we rate? So announcement about next week. I will be away on the weekend, so there will be no weekend stream for me. So that means no Poké-Commander stream. If you guys want to play Poké-Commander, like, be my guest. I would love for you guys to play Poké-Commander. That'd be awesome. Or I'm also considering. No, I shouldn't play Poké-Commander on Tuesday. No. I don't have a new deck ready for that yet. I will have an expanded deck ready for next Tuesday. Don't worry about that. Right. Thanks everyone so much for watching. We're gonna go right into Ellie, and thank you so much for watching. Appreciate ya. Bye.
The score is not going to him in these Hunger Games. the score is not going to influence your experience into the Hunger Games. So good luck with that. You got this. Just drinking coffee. Exactly. Just just that. Um, Next is Ocean with a 2 out of 12. Damn, Ocean, what did you do that you think the game makers didn't like? What happened during your training? Noah, Noah, hello, welcome in. Thank you so much for the raid. I appreciate a lot. Hello, hello. You're looking for more good music here? Hello. What were you streaming? What were you up to? I can see it. I can see it from here because I am streaming special events. But what were you doing? Pokemon traded card game. I hope you had fun. Hello, hello. Damn you, capitalism. Exactly. Ocean, what do you think didn't go well into your hint?